Hello there, and welcome to the Tired Thinker, where curiosity drifts softly and wonder comes wrapped in quiet confusion. Tonight's slow question is about something deeply human, mysterious, unsettling, and oddly intimate: our memories. Have you ever been certain of something, only to find the world swears it never happened that way? A logo you could draw from memory, different. A line from a movie, never spoken. A death you remember, undone. This is the Mandela Effect, when entire groups of people recall the same thing that never was. Is it mass misremembering, parallel realities, or the mind's strange way of protecting itself from chaos? It's a quiet riddle, one that lives not in the stars, but inside our own heads. Before we wander down this corridor of confusion, I'd love to know, where are you thinking from tonight? And what time is it in your little pocket of reality? It's strange, isn't it, to talk about false memories, and yet here we are, sharing one real moment in time. If you find comfort in gentle questions, or if you're here to rest your thoughts after a long day of remembering and misremembering, I'd be so grateful if you softly subscribed or left a quiet like. It helps this tired little channel reach others who wonder gently too. Now, let's begin. Imagine you and a friend remember the same childhood movie. You recall a scene where the hero says a certain line. Your friend swears that line never existed. You both feel sure. You both believe your memory is right. You even look it up, but no trace of that version exists. The quote isn't in the script. It's not in old clips. It seems to have vanished. This is a cognitive rift, when shared memory splits into parallel recollections. The Mandela Effect gets its name from people remembering Nelson Mandela dying in prison in the 1980s, even though he was released and became South Africa's president years later. It's an example of a collective false memory, but what makes it so strange is that so many people remember the same false detail in the same way. It isn't just one person misremembering, it's entire groups, often across countries and cultures, who share the same incorrect version of the past. In a cognitive rift, reality and recollection fall out of sync. The human brain doesn't store memories like a video recording. It rebuilds them every time we recall them. Each act of remembering is also an act of rewriting. The mind fills in gaps, smooths over rough edges, and creates coherence where there was once confusion. It does this to protect us from uncertainty. But when many people rebuild the same event in the same way, something larger happens. A collective version of truth forms, whether it's accurate or not. Take a simple example, the Monopoly Man. Many people picture him with a monocle, yet he never had one. That tiny detail feels so real that when people see a picture of him without it, they feel a jolt of disbelief. Their minds protest. The same goes for the Berenstain Bears. Thousands of readers remember Berenstain with an E. The real name, Berenstain, feels wrong. The word looks misspelled, even though it's right there on every cover. The brain seeks patterns. It likes symmetry and familiarity. When we store a memory, we don't keep every detail. We keep the structure and emotional tone. If you recall a bear family from your childhood, your mind may correct Berenstain into the more familiar Berenstein. It fits your mental template better. Multiply that by millions of people exposed to the same books and culture, and a shared error becomes a shared certainty. But the Mandela Effect goes beyond spelling errors. Some people remember entire events that never happened. Movie releases, celebrity deaths, even changes in geography or product design. These are large-scale cognitive rifts. They reveal how fragile our shared reality can be. The moment we rely on memory alone, we enter a world that is half reconstruction, half imagination. Psychologists suggest that these rifts often start with one convincing false claim. When someone confidently recalls an event, others begin to question their own memory. Social reinforcement plays a key role. Once a few people agree, the belief spreads, and soon the collective memory feels stronger than the evidence against it. The internet accelerates this process. One post, one image, or one mistaken caption can ripple through millions of minds in hours. Imagine a friend swears they saw a movie scene where a character says, "Luke, I am your father." You know the actual line is, "No, I am your father." Yet you might start to doubt yourself. The line has been repeated in jokes, memes, and parodies for decades. Even though you've seen the original film, your brain starts blending the real with the repeated. Over time, the false version feels more natural. Cognitive rifts show how memory is not a personal archive, but a living network. Each brain syncs loosely with others through stories, conversations, and shared experiences. When that network drifts, our sense of truth drifts with it. People begin to live in slightly different versions of the same world. One where Mandela died, one where he lived, both equally real to those who remember. This isn't evidence of parallel universes, though it's easy to see why the idea appeals. The concept of alternate timelines offers a comforting explanation. It says our memories aren't wrong, they just belong elsewhere. But science offers a simpler answer. Memory is suggestible. Each recall reshapes the past. Each discussion reshapes the recall. Still, even with a rational explanation, the emotional pull remains. When you remember something so clearly that the world tells you it never happened, it feels like reality itself has betrayed you. That quiet dissonance between what you know and what is where the cognitive rift opens. It's not a glitch in the universe, but a feature of being human. We live in a shared dream stitched together by stories, and sometimes the seams don't match. You wake up and check your phone. It says 7:42 a.m. The same routine as always, same coffee, same quiet kitchen. But something feels off. You can't say what it is. Maybe it's the color of the light through the window. Maybe it's the way the clock's second hand seems to hesitate. You glance back at your phone and see the time again. 7:42. It hasn't moved. You blink. Now it says 7:44. It's a small thing, a hiccup in time, easy to ignore. But moments like this hint at a deeper question. Does time always move the way we think it does? Or does it sometimes drift? Chronological drift is the strange feeling that time doesn't flow evenly. It bends, stretches, and folds back on itself. You might experience it when you swear something happened last week, but everyone else insists it was months ago. You might look up an old photo and find the date doesn't match your memory. It's not a big mistake, but it leaves a trace of unease. The brain expects time to be linear, but our experience often isn't. Memory is the first thing to slip. The human mind doesn't store timestamps like a digital recorder. It connects events through emotion and context. You might remember a song from a summer long ago, and for a moment that summer feels closer than last year. You may remember your school days as a long stretch of years, even though they were brief. When you recall them, your brain rebuilds the sense of time from fragments. If one piece moves, the whole structure shifts. People often describe these moments as déjà vu or false continuity. You feel certain that an event repeated, or that history changed its shape when you weren't looking. Maybe a news story you thought was recent turns out to be a decade old. Maybe you could have sworn a famous person died, yet they're alive and well. The mind adjusts, but something in you doesn't quite believe the correction. It's as if your timeline got quietly rewritten. This drift also appears in shared history. Groups of people misremember when events occurred. A movie release date, a political scandal, a natural disaster. The details slide around in collective memory. One generation swears a moment defined their youth. Another insists it happened years later. The record is fixed, but the emotional clock disagrees. Each person's sense of when something happened is shaped by personal rhythm. What else was going on? How it felt? What age they were? Time inside the mind isn't measured in minutes, but in meaning. Imagine two people remembering their college years. One says it feels like yesterday. The other feels it's a lifetime ago. They both lived through the same events, but their inner timelines differ. The first might have stayed close to old habits. The second might have changed careers, cities, or beliefs. To the mind, transformation stretches time, while repetition compresses it. When days feel the same, months vanish in memory. When everything changes, even a week feels long. Science calls this the perception of temporal distortion. During intense experiences, fear, grief, or wonder, the brain releases chemicals that heighten awareness. Time seems to slow. In boredom, attention fades and time collapses. That's why a quiet commute feels longer than a thrilling trip. You wake up and check your phone. It says 7:42 a.m. The same routine as always, same coffee, same quiet kitchen. But something feels off. You can't say what it is. Maybe it's the color of the light through the window. Maybe it's the way the clock's second hand seems to hesitate. You glance back at your phone and see the time again. 7:42. It hasn't moved. You blink. Now it says 7:44. It's a small thing, a hiccup in time, easy to ignore. But moments like this hint at a deeper question. Does time always move the way we think it does? Or does it sometimes drift? Chronological drift is the strange feeling that time doesn't flow evenly. It bends, stretches, and folds back on itself. You might experience it when you swear something happened last week, but everyone else insists it was months ago. You might look up an old photo and find the date doesn't match your memory. It's not a big mistake, but it leaves a trace of unease. The brain expects time to be linear, but our experience often isn't. Memory is the first thing to slip. The human mind doesn't store timestamps like a digital recorder. It connects events through emotion and context. You might remember a song from a summer long ago, and for a moment that summer feels closer than last year. You may remember your school days as a long stretch of years, even though they were brief. When you recall them, your brain rebuilds the sense of time from fragments. If one piece moves, the whole structure shifts. People often describe these moments as déjà vu or false continuity. You feel certain that an event repeated, or that history changed its shape when you weren't looking. Maybe a news story you thought was recent turns out to be a decade old. Maybe you could have sworn a famous person died, yet they're alive and well. The mind adjusts, but something in you doesn't quite believe the correction. It's as if your timeline got quietly rewritten. This drift also appears in shared history. Groups of people misremember when events occur. You remember something clearly. A movie line, a logo, a famous quote. You mention it to a friend, and they remember it too. You both agree without hesitation. It feels solid, a shared truth. But then you look it up, and it's wrong. Not just a little wrong, but completely off. The line was never said. The logo never looked that way. yet millions of people remember it the same way you do. That's the strange territory of mass memory, where individual recall merges into something shared, something that feels real but isn't. This is what we call the echo of consensus, a kind of collective hallucination. The term collective hallucination doesn't mean people are delusional or seeing things that aren't there in a medical sense. It describes how groups of people can believe in the same false detail with deep conviction. Memory is not just personal, it's social. When we talk about what we remember, we align our recollections with others. The more we agree, the more real the memory feels. It becomes part of a shared narrative, one that can outlive the facts that formed it. Take the famous example of the Monopoly man. Ask around, and many will insist he wears a monocle. They can picture it. They see it in their mind. They may even swear they saw it on the game box as kids. Yet the monocle was never part of his design. People still debate this online, posting mock-ups and comparing versions. What they're really debating isn't the logo, it's the strength of collective recall. When enough people echo the same false detail, the echo becomes louder than the truth. Another example is the movie Shazam, a film that never existed. Thousands remember a 1990s family comedy starring the comedian Sinbad as a genie. Some even describe the plot, the poster, the VHS cover. They can recall renting it from a local store. But no such film was ever made. What did exist was Kazam, starring Shaquille O'Neal as a genie. The two names and themes are close enough that minds across the world created a shared phantom movie out of overlapping memories. These echoes spread through conversation, repetition, and trust. When someone you believe says they remember the same thing, your mind relaxes its guard. Agreement reinforces certainty. It's a social shortcut that helps people navigate the world. Normally, it keeps groups stable and aligned. But when applied to faulty memories, it amplifies error instead. The falsehood becomes more durable with each retelling. Online spaces magnify this effect. Before the internet, a mistaken recollection might have stayed within a family or a small circle. Now, one memory mismatch can reach millions. A post about an old commercial or a misquoted line can gather thousands of comments from people who remember it that way too. Once that shared recognition takes hold, it stops feeling like confusion and starts feeling like proof. The echo hardens into consensus. You can see this pattern in smaller, everyday moments too. Imagine a group of coworkers trying to recall when a policy changed. One says it happened in 2021. Another nods and says, yes, during the lockdowns. Soon everyone agrees it was that year. But later, a document shows the change happened in 2019. No one lied. The group memory simply synchronized around the first confident voice. Human memory doesn't store objective time. It stores meaning and emotion. When a story fits our shared emotional frame, we adopt it. Psychologists call this social conformity in memory. The brain favors belonging over accuracy. Disagreeing with a group, even silently, creates discomfort. So when we hear a memory that matches our general impression, we often merge it with our own. Over time, a collective version replaces the individual one. You may even remember new details that fit the group's story. It's similar to how rumors evolve. Each person who repeats a story shapes it slightly. The small edits add up. By the 10th retelling, the story bears only a loose resemblance to the truth, yet it feels more satisfying, more complete. The same happens with memories. The gaps get filled in, the emotions get polished. The false parts feel right because they make the story flow better. Consider the famous Star Wars misquote, "Luke, I am your father." Darth Vader never says, "Luke." The line is simply, "No, I am your father." But adding the name makes it clearer in conversation, so people repeated it that way. It became the version that made sense. Over time, it entered culture, parodies, t-shirts, jokes, until the echo replaced the original sound. The misquote became collective truth. The mind uses social cues to decide what's real. When something is repeated by many voices, it triggers familiarity, and familiarity feels like truth. This is called the illusory truth effect. You can see it in marketing, politics, even simple gossip. The more often we hear something, the more likely we are to believe it, even if we once knew it was false. The same pattern fuels mass memory errors. What makes the Mandela effect so compelling is that these false memories don't spread randomly. They cluster around shared culture, movies, brands, songs, historical events. They reveal how much our sense of the past depends on each other. No one owns a complete version of reality. We build it together, layer by layer, through stories we tell and repeat. A collective hallucination doesn't mean the world changed overnight. It means people changed together. A small, harmless shift in detail becomes a mirror showing how deeply we rely on consensus to feel certain. We remember not just with our minds, but with our communities. When enough of us agree, even an error can sound like truth. And sometimes, in the quiet rhythm of shared memory, the echo is all that remains. You're sitting at a table with an old photo album open in front of you. The pictures bring back a flood of memories, a family trip, a birthday, a school friend. You can almost smell the air, hear the laughter, feel the heat of that summer. Everything seems clear. Then you notice something odd. The date written on the back doesn't match your memory. You were sure that trip happened after high school, but the photo says you were still in middle school. You stare at it, confused. Which version is true, the record or the recollection? This is the moment the archive glitches. The archive is your memory, not a static vault, but a living system. You might think of your mind as a library where every moment is stored on a shelf, ready to be revisited. But in truth, it's more like a rewritable hard drive. Each time you remember something, your brain pulls it from storage, opens the file, and saves it again when you're done thinking about it. A new version can overwrite details from the original without your awareness. The process feels natural, even effortless. But every recall risks an edit. This is how memory works. It's not designed for accuracy, it's designed for survival. The brain stores the parts of experience that seem important, the danger, the emotion, the outcome, and lets the rest fade. When you recall an event, your brain reconstructs it using a mix of stored fragments, assumptions, and imagination. You don't relive the memory, you rebuild it. That's why eyewitness testimony, even from honest people, can be unreliable. The archive isn't lying, it's just updating. Imagine a conversation you had years ago. You remember what was said, the color of the room, the expression on someone's face. But over time, your memory softens. You may forget who spoke first, or whether a joke was made. Later, someone else tells you their version of that day. They mention details you'd forgotten. You might adopt some of them without realizing it. The next time you remember that conversation, those new details feel like they were always there. The record has changed, rewritten by exposure and repetition. This happens constantly. Think about a story you've told many times. Each retelling becomes smoother. You fill in missing parts to keep it interesting. You skip others to save time. Eventually, you're no longer sure which version was the original. The memory you hold now is a story shaped by telling, not by time. You've revised the archive without meaning to. Sometimes entire groups update their mental records together. This is how collective memory shifts. A generation grows up believing an event unfolded one way, even though the documents say otherwise. Cultural narratives, the way we talk about wars, inventions, or public figures, evolve with each generation. Over decades, factual record and the remembered version diverge. Both feel true in their own ways, because memory follows meaning more than measurement. Technology deepens this effect. Old photos get filtered, cropped, or recaptioned. Online posts resurface years later with new context. People quote lines from movies or speeches slightly wrong, and the misquote spreads faster than the correction. Over time, the wrong version becomes the familiar one. The human brain treats familiarity as truth, so the false record wins. The archive has glitched again, not from malice, but from momentum. On a smaller scale, emotional experiences rewrite themselves most often. When you're hurt or embarrassed, your brain adjusts the story each time you revisit it. It might soften the pain or amplify the cause, depending on what helps you cope. A failure becomes less painful when you remember it as a lesson. A lost relationship feels gentler when you recall it with acceptance instead of regret. These edits aren't deceitful, they're protective. The archive repairs itself to keep you steady. But not every rewrite is comforting. Sometimes your mind replaces clarity with confusion. You recall placing your keys on the counter, yet they're not there. You remember sending that message, but it's missing from your phone. Small glitches like these reveal how fragile working memory is. The mind can't perfectly track every action, so it fills in blanks. The false memory feels as genuine as the real one, until evidence proves otherwise. The discovery of that mismatch between what you know and what you see is unsettling. Consider how this plays out in daily life. Two people argue about something one of them said a week ago. Each insists on their version. Neither is lying. Both are working from records that have been rewritten by emotion, assumption, and time. The mind smooths over uncertainty until conviction replaces doubt. Once a memory feels certain, it's nearly impossible to edit again, even when proven wrong. The archive locks the new version as if it were always there. Scientists call this process memory reconsolidation. Each recall briefly makes a memory malleable. The brain can then alter or strengthen it before storing it again. This flexibility is useful. It helps people learn and adapt. But it also explains why memory errors are so persistent. Every time you think about a moment, you risk changing it. And because the update happens below awareness, you never see the glitch. You only live with its results. The archive glitch is quiet. It doesn't announce itself with flashing lights or missing files. It hides in the smoothness of your own certainty. What you remember feels authentic because it's yours, rebuilt by your own mind. Yet the more you revisit it, the more it bends. The past is not fixed behind you. It's rewritten every time you look back. You remember a moment so vividly that it feels stitched into your life. A room, a smell, a voice saying your name. The feeling is warm and familiar, yet when you mention it to someone who is there, they say it never happened. You're left puzzled, searching for a thread that's come loose. This is what we might call a psychic patchwork, when false memories form out of real emotion. The mind, always trying to make sense of things, weaves scraps of feeling into patterns that look like truth. Memory doesn't begin with facts, it begins with feeling. When something moves us, joy, fear, embarrassment, comfort, that emotion acts like thread. The brain uses it to bind together fragments of experience. But sometimes those fragments don't come from the same source. A sound from one day, a color from another, a sentence overheard years later. they blend into one scene that never truly existed. Memory feels real because the emotion holding it together is real. Think of a recurring childhood image. Maybe you picture yourself lost in a supermarket. You remember the shelves towering over you, the sound of music echoing through the aisles, the fear rising in your chest. You can see your mother's face when she finds you again. But as an adult, she tells you it wasn't you. It was your sibling who got lost that day. Still, your mind insists on the memory. You can see it clearly. The brain may have borrowed your sibling's story and stitched it to your own emotion of fear. That emotion anchored the false memory until it became part of your identity. This process happens quietly and often. The mind values coherence over accuracy. It doesn't want loose ends or half-formed experiences. When something emotional happens, your brain tries to store it in a way that feels complete. If pieces are missing, it fills them in. Those fillings are guesses shaped by emotion, not lies, not imagination, but reconstruction. Over time, those guesses harden into memories that feel unshakably real. Emotions also act as filters. Two people can share an event but remember it differently because they felt different things. One remembers laughter, the other remembers tension. Both accounts are true in the emotional sense. The brain stores the feeling first and builds the story around it later. That's why couples, families, and friends often argue about what really happened. They're comparing emotional truths that never matched from the start. The psychic patchwork effect shows up clearly after trauma. People who live through distressing experiences often remember fragments instead of full stories. A sound, a smell, or a visual detail may stand out while other parts remain blank. The mind later tries to repair these gaps, often by combining memories from separate events that carry similar feelings. The result is a memory that feels complete, but isn't accurate. This can cause confusion or guilt, as someone wonders how their own recollection could feel so certain, yet differ from recorded facts. You can see the same mechanism at work in smaller, everyday ways. Imagine you're sure a coworker once criticized your idea in a meeting. You remember the tone, the words, the sting of embarrassment. But when you replay the meeting recording, the words were never said. The feeling of being dismissed was real, but your brain may have constructed a dialogue that fit the emotion. It wasn't deceit. It was your mind protecting your sense of cause and effect. Memory researchers often use the term source misattribution. It means the brain remembers a piece of information but forgets where it came from. Maybe you read something, dreamed it, or imagined it briefly, then later recall it as a lived event. Emotion strengthens the confusion. If the imagined scene carried emotional weight, the mind gives it the same status as a real one. The more often you revisit it, the stronger the emotional stitching becomes. Media and storytelling amplify this effect. A movie, a song, or even a social media post can evoke a strong emotional reaction. That emotion becomes a mental tag, and your brain may later attach it to your own experiences. You might recall a childhood moment that feels cinematic because it has borrowed details from the films you loved. You may even remember conversations that only happened in dreams or daydreams, yet they blend seamlessly into your narrative. The emotion authenticates them. Families create collective versions of this patchwork too. Shared stories evolve with each retelling. A minor accident turns into a family legend. The story absorbs humor, fear, and pride until it's no longer about what happened, but about what the group feels it means. Each time someone tells it, they reinforce their emotional thread, sometimes adding a new patch, sometimes trimming one away. What remains is a tapestry that represents belonging more than accuracy. Even in solitude, the mind keeps weaving. You might dwell on a painful event and imagine how it could have gone differently. Over time, those imagined moments can blur into the real sequence. The mind may offer the revised version first, leaving you unsure of which order things occurred. These subtle changes aren't errors. They're the brain's attempt to reconcile emotion with memory. When what happened doesn't match how it felt, the brain changes what happened. This is why false memories can feel truer than real ones. They emerge not from confusion, but from the deep need for coherence. Every person wants their life to make emotional sense. The psychic patchwork allows that by filling in the blanks with threads of feeling. It builds a world that aligns with what you felt, even when it strays from what occurred. The seams are invisible because emotion hides them. And once a memory feels whole, the mind stops questioning its design. You wake up one morning and something feels slightly off. The world looks the same, but the details don't quite fit. A street sign seems different. A store you pass every day has a new name, and you're sure it wasn't there yesterday. You mention it to a friend, and they look at you with confusion. They say it's always been that way. You start to question yourself. Did you misremember? Or did something in reality shift just a little, as if the universe printed a new version and forgot to tell you? That's the feeling behind what we can call a dimensional misprint. The phrase sounds poetic, but it describes a real psychological puzzle. It's the sense that the fabric of everyday life has been slightly retyped, a sign of how fragile our trust in memory and continuity can be. The human brain expects stability. It depends on the assumption that the world tomorrow will match the one it left today. When even small details appear to change, it shakes that assumption. We don't feel like our memories are wrong. We feel like reality itself made an error. Imagine printing a long document. Everything comes out clean until one page jams, smearing the ink. You fix it and print again, but now a few lines overlap, creating strange duplicates. That's what a dimensional misprint feels like. Two versions of reality overlapping, one faint but familiar, the other solid but slightly wrong. You can't tell which version is the real one, because both seem equally possible. This idea connects with the Mandela Effect, where large groups share the same false memory. People collectively remember an alternate version of history, as though the printer jammed for everyone at once. It isn't just personal confusion. It's a social phenomenon that exposes how fragile shared reality can be. The world looks consistent, yet our minds don't always agree on its record. Consider a common example. Many people recall the children's book series, The Berenstain Bears, as the Berenstain Bears. The difference is one letter, but the emotional reaction to discovering it is enormous. People insist they saw it spelled with an E. They imagine pulling the book from a childhood shelf and seeing the familiar name. Yet all copies say Berenstain. For some, the only explanation that feels satisfying is the idea of a split, that they came from a timeline where Berenstain was real and somehow ended up here. The feeling of a dimensional misprint grows stronger when multiple small mismatches pile up. A movie quote sounds different than you remember. A logo looks redesigned but isn't. A historical event seems to have moved dates. When these patterns appear across unrelated details, the mind starts to treat them as evidence. Logic tells you memory can fail, but the emotional weight of familiarity tells you something larger must have shifted. The sense of displacement becomes physical, almost vertigo-like. Psychologists explain this through reconstructive memory. Each time we recall something, we rebuild it from fragments stored in different parts of the brain. It's like piecing together a photo from a handful of torn scraps. Most of the time, we reconstruct it accurately. But when fragments overlap or pieces are missing, we fill in gaps using context and expectation. Over years, that rebuilt version replaces the original. When we later face evidence that contradicts it, it feels as if reality changed, not us. The mind resists the idea that its internal record could be faulty. To protect a sense of continuity, it externalizes the error. The universe glitched, we say, or the timeline shifted. The brain prefers a cosmic explanation over accepting its own imperfection. This isn't delusion, it's a normal response to cognitive dissonance. When two equally strong truths, memory and observation, collide, we look for a third option that preserves both. The dimensional misprint offers that option. Imagine two people debating a small detail from a shared experience. The color of a car, the placement of a sign, a line someone said. They both feel certain. Neither is lying. Their memories have diverged, but their conviction is identical. Each mind has printed its own version of the event, and neither can tell which copy came off the press first. That's the human condition in miniature. Billions of minds printing overlapping drafts of reality every day. Technology has deepened this phenomenon. Digital archives preserve countless versions of everything: logos, songs, news headlines. When people revisit them, they find that their memories don't match the record. A company slogan changed years ago, but your brain never updated. A scene you swore existed in an old movie is gone, replaced by something slightly off. The internet turns these discoveries into shared experiences. Each misprint becomes a thread in a global conversation about how unstable reality feels. For some, these experiences trigger fascination. For others, anxiety. The modern world changes so quickly that it can mimic the feeling of shifting dimensions. Apps update overnight. Streets are renamed. Familiar brands vanish. The pace of change leaves memory lagging behind, and the gap between what we recall and what we see widens. It's no wonder the idea of alternate timelines feels intuitive. We live in a world that reboots constantly. Think of a friend who swears they remember a restaurant on a corner that's now an empty lot. They can describe the menu, the smell, the table by the window. You check old maps and find no record of it. They grow quiet, unsure whether to trust themselves. You might laugh it off, but for them, it's unsettling. They aren't clinging to fantasy. They're confronting the possibility that their private version of the world is slightly out of sync with yours. The experience of that dissonance, that eerie near overlap, is what gives the idea of a dimensional misprint its power. It's not proof that universes collide. It's proof that perception and memory can drift apart so smoothly we don't notice the change until it's too late. Like a printer jamming mid-page, reality sometimes feels like it skipped a line. You can still read the story, but somewhere between the sentences, the ink blurred, and you're left wondering which draft you're living in. You're sitting in a dark room, half asleep, staring at a pattern on the wall. It's nothing but random shadows and light. Yet a face begins to form. You blink, and it's gone. The wall was never alive, never hiding anything. Still, for a moment, your brain made sense of the chaos. It built an image out of noise. That quiet mistake is what we can call a neural mirage, when the brain conjures familiar patterns from static. The human brain is a pattern machine. It evolved to find structure, even when none exists. A rustle in the grass could be the wind, or it could be danger. The mind learned to assume meaning before certainty. That bias helped our ancestors survive. Seeing a tiger that isn't there is safer than missing one that is. But the same mechanism now makes us see faces in clouds, hear our name in white noise, or recall connections between events that never truly linked. The brain prefers false positives to empty silence. Scientists call this tendency pareidolia, the perception of familiar shapes in random data. It's why people see animals in the stars or human figures on burnt toast. But beyond shapes, this process extends to memory, belief, and perception itself. When information is incomplete, the brain fills the gaps with patterns that feel true. It's not lying, it's guessing. The neural mirage is that guess, presented as certainty. Imagine walking home at night. You hear footsteps behind you. You turn and see no one. Still, the rhythm continues in your mind. You quicken your pace. Later, you realize the sound came from your own echo or the pattern of your heartbeat in your ears. The fear was real, even if the source was false. Your brain detected a pattern in the noise of the night and turned it into a story that made sense in the moment. That's how perception keeps you safe, but also how it deceives you. Memory works the same way. It doesn't record life like a camera. It rebuilds experience from fragments each time you recall it. When those fragments are incomplete, the brain improvises. It invents details that match your expectations. Think of remembering an old friend's living room. You picture the couch, the curtains, the smell of coffee. But maybe you've merged two homes, your friend's and your grandmother's, without realizing it. The emotional familiarity between them stitches together a false image. You're not imagining something from nothing. You're creating coherence out of static. This pattern making extends to how we understand time. When you misplace your keys, your brain reconstructs the last known sequence of events. It fills in steps that seem logical, even if they never occurred. You remember setting the keys on the counter because that's where they usually go. When you later find them in your bag, you feel momentary disbelief. The memory feels real because it fits the pattern your brain expects. That's the mirage at work, order projected onto randomness. Art and religion often spring from this same neural impulse. Early humans looked up at constellations and saw hunters, lions, and serpents. They gave meaning to random points of light. The stars didn't change, but the mind turned them into stories. Today, the same pattern-seeking tendency drives conspiracy theories and coincidences. Someone notices two unrelated events and connects them. Once that link is imagined, the brain reinforces it. The pattern becomes self-confirming. The mirage hardens into belief. Technology has created new forms of neural mirages. Algorithms feed us patterns, faces recognized by cameras, words predicted by phones, playlists shaped by behavior. When artificial systems mirror our pattern-seeking brains, they amplify our biases. You see one headline, then 10 more like it. You start believing a trend exists where there's only noise. The feedback loop turns random data into apparent proof. Machines don't dream, but they reflect our tendency to find meaning where there is none. In daily life, neural mirages appear in smaller ways. You might mishear a song lyric, then keep hearing it that way for years. Even after learning the real words, your brain insists on the old version. Familiarity overrides correction. Or you might swear you saw your phone light up when it didn't. The brain anticipates patterns of behavior, message, vibration, notification, and simulates them. The expectation becomes sensation. The pattern exists not outside, but inside you. Even emotions create mirages. When you expect rejection, you may see signs of it in every gesture. When you're in love, you find meaning in coincidences, shared glances, matching thoughts. songs that appear at the right time. The feeling amplifies the illusion until it becomes a private reality. The mirage comforts or warns, depending on what you need most. The stronger the emotion, the clearer the false pattern becomes. Neuroscientists have studied this through experiments with visual noise. When shown random black and white dots, people often report seeing faces. Brain scans reveal activity in the fusiform gyrus, the region that processes facial recognition. The pattern doesn't exist, but the brain lights up as if it does. Once that recognition circuit fires, logic arrives too late. You've already seen something, even if it's not there. The same mechanism shapes false memories and paranormal experiences. The mind isn't malfunctioning, it's overperforming. The neural mirage explains much of what we call mystery. A strange sound in a quiet room becomes a whisper. A coincidence becomes a sign. A flicker of shadow becomes movement. Each interpretation starts as static, then resolves into form, because the brain insists on clarity. Our minds can't stand empty noise. They rewrite it until it means something. The comfort of the mirage lies in its familiarity. Even when wrong, it feels right. The pattern resembles something we know, a face, a sound, a story. The world feels safer when it fits a recognizable shape, but this safety comes at a cost. Every illusion we accept without question widens the gap between perception and reality. The brain keeps drawing shapes in the noise, unaware that the canvas is blank, and yet it must. That's how we survive in the static, by imagining order until the silence makes sense. You come across an old photograph in a box at the back of a closet. The faces are familiar, but one detail stops you cold. A person you remember clearly, someone who was there that day, is missing from the picture. You're certain they stood next to you. You even remember what they wore. Yet, in the photo, the space beside you is empty. You check again, zoom in, hold it under better light. Nothing. For a moment, it feels like the universe has quietly rearranged itself. That unease, the sense that evidence doesn't line up with memory, is where the idea of parallel proof begins. Parallel proof describes the experience of finding traces that seem to belong to another version of reality. People who believe in the Mandela Effect often use it to explain why objects, words, or records appear to have changed. They see these discrepancies as signs of overlapping timelines, fragments from one reality seeping into another. Whether or not you accept that idea, the feeling is easy to recognize. Something doesn't fit, and you can't explain why. Take a common example. A person swears they grew up watching a movie called Shazam, starring the comedian Sinbad as a genie. They remember the box art, the plot, even specific scenes. Others remember it too, but when they search for it, no record exists. They find Kazam, a similar film with Shaquille O'Neal, but it's not the one they recall. For many, this isn't just misremembering, it's evidence of a split. They imagine a version of reality where Shazam was real, and somehow, memories from that world bled into this one. From a scientific point of view, these experiences come from the way memory and perception interact. The brain stores fragments of experience, not full recordings. When recalling, it rebuilds events from pieces of information scattered across neural networks. Each reconstruction is influenced by context, mood, and expectation. If two memories share emotional tone or imagery, they can merge. The brain fills in missing data by drawing from similar experiences. Over time, the blend feels as solid as fact. But when many people share the same false recollection, it feels harder to dismiss. If hundreds of strangers all insist a logo, line, or event once looked or happened differently, the collective certainty feels like evidence. The internet strengthens this illusion by connecting people who once would have doubted themselves in isolation. A comment on a forum can validate what feels like impossible proof. Screenshots, misprinted products, and half-remembered quotes circulate as physical anchors for what shouldn't exist. One example often cited is the Fruit of the Loom logo. Many people remember it featuring a cornucopia behind the fruit. The current logo has none, and historical versions don't either. Still, people swear they've seen it. Some have even found old drawings or packaging that include one. These artifacts serve as what believers call residual evidence, material that slipped through from an alternate timeline. They point to these inconsistencies as proof that the merge between realities isn't perfect. In psychology, a different explanation applies. When the mind encounters ambiguity, it completes the pattern. A pile of fruit looks unfinished without a container, so the brain adds one. Later, that addition feels real, but because the correction happens subconsciously, we can't detect it. To us, the cornucopia was always there. The evidence, in this case, the memory, doesn't come from another world, but from a repair job done inside our own. Still, there's something haunting about the notion that timelines might overlap. The physics concept of the multiverse suggests infinite versions of reality, each with small differences. If those boundaries ever blur, even slightly, the result might resemble what people describe as parallel proof. A song lyric changed by one word, a famous quote that's subtly altered, a face in an old yearbook that looks almost like someone you know, but not quite. The science is speculative, but the emotional experience is real. When the familiar doesn't match the record, we feel displaced, as if part of us belongs somewhere else. Think of a moment when you're sure you've seen or heard something before, but no one else remembers it. You find an old article, an object, or a document that supports your version, only to lose track of it later. When you try to find it again, it's gone, replaced by the alternate version. That missing artifact becomes your proof. It doesn't matter that others can't verify it. The personal certainty is stronger than any argument. The more the world denies your memory, the more you cling to the small traces that seem to validate it. In many ways, parallel proof is a reflection of human need, the need for coherence between memory and world. When the two diverge, we search for ways to reconnect them. Some turn to logic and accept that memory is unreliable. Others turn to metaphysics and imagine dimensions colliding. Both responses come from the same place, discomfort with uncertainty. The brain wants cause and effect to align. When it can't find the link, it invents one. Technology complicates this further. Digital records change easily. Websites update without notice. Old articles vanish or get rewritten. A headline you saw last year might read differently today. The internet gives us a fluid, editable archive that feels permanent but isn't. When digital history changes quietly, it can mimic the feeling of an altered timeline. You remember reading one version, now you can only find another. The screen becomes the new reality, and your memory becomes the ghost of the old one. There's also the issue of false artifacts. Images, mock-ups, and fabrications circulate online so convincingly that they reinforce belief in parallel versions of the past. Someone posts a doctored logo or fake magazine cover. Others see it, recognize it, and assume it confirms their memory. Once the proof appears, even temporarily, it lodges in the collective imagination. When it's later removed or debunked, the absence feels like a cover-up. The more the evidence vanishes, the stronger the conviction grows. What makes the idea of parallel proof so compelling is that it gives shape to the strange overlaps we all experience. The gaps between memory, perception, and record. We live in an age where every moment is documented, yet contradictions persist. The digital and the mental archives rarely match. Whether the explanation lies in cognitive science or in something stranger, the result feels the same. Fragments of another story occasionally appear in ours, like ink bleeding through from a page beneath. The evidence might not be proof of alternate timelines, but it reminds us how thin the boundary is between what we remember and what truly was. You walk into a room and feel a flicker of confusion. The air seems different, heavier somehow. The furniture looks right, yet something in the arrangement feels off. A photo on the wall that you don't remember buying. A book you thought you lost, resting on the table. You stand still, scanning each detail, trying to match what you see with what you remember. For a moment, you're not sure which version is true. The room you recall, or the one in front of you. This quiet unease is what can be called perceptual overlap, a moment when two versions of reality seem to occupy the same space. The sensation doesn't have to involve anything dramatic. It can happen in the simplest setting, walking down a familiar street and noticing that a building looks both new and old at the same time, or hearing a phrase that feels like it's been said before in a moment that hasn't happened yet. The experience feels like déjà vu, but runs deeper. It's not just a trick of recognition. It's as if your mind is trying to reconcile two maps of the same terrain that don't align. Perceptual overlap often begins with expectation. The brain is constantly predicting what comes next. When it encounters something that doesn't fit, a small inconsistency in sight or sound, it tries to merge both versions rather than reject one. For a brief moment, the two realities coexist in the same mental frame. One belongs to memory, the other to perception. The brain, unable to choose between them, allows both to flicker at once. Imagine sitting in your childhood kitchen. The wallpaper is different now, the light softer. You know you're visiting as an adult, but for a few seconds, it feels like both times exist together, the past and the present layered in the same moment. You can almost hear the voices that once filled the room. Then it fades, and you're back in the present, holding a cup of coffee in silence. What happened wasn't mystical, it was perceptual overlap. Memory briefly overlaid itself on reality, as if the mind projected an old film onto a new screen. Neuroscientists might explain this as a conflict between sensory input and stored imagery. The hippocampus, which processes memory, and the visual cortex, which interprets sight, sometimes compete for attention. When their signals overlap, the result is a merged experience that feels both real and unreal. You see what's in front of you, but you also see what your brain expects. The blending happens faster than thought, before logic has a chance to separate them. This blending can happen with sound as well. You might hear someone call your name in a crowd and turn, only to find no one there. Or you might think you hear music faintly playing from another room when there's silence. The auditory system, like vision, fills in patterns based on context. When two similar but not identical signals arrive, one from the environment, one from internal expectation, the brain sometimes merges them. You hear both worlds at once, what's present and what's predicted. Cultural stories of ghosts, parallel universes, or time slips often come from experiences like this. A person walks into a familiar place and swears it looked different, or they encounter someone who seems out of place, dressed from another decade. The event feels supernatural, but it may stem from the way perception stitches reality from multiple layers. When those layers misalign, the mind senses both at once. To the observer, it feels like two realities briefly touching. The modern world, with its flood of digital information, creates new versions of this phenomenon. You scroll through old photos and see one edited version of an image alongside the original. Your mind holds both simultaneously, the past image that feels true and the new one that exists now. The same happens with news stories or digital maps that update overnight. Something you were certain existed yesterday is gone today, replaced by an alternate version. The boundary between what was and what is becomes soft, allowing both to feel present at once. Perceptual overlap can also appear in emotional states. During grief, people sometimes feel the presence of someone who has passed away. They hear footsteps, sense movement, or smell something familiar. The mind, still holding the emotional image of the person, projects it into the space around them. They know the person isn't there, yet for a moment, the perception feels real. Two versions of reality coexist, one shaped by loss, the other by sensory fact. Even smaller experiences show this duality. You reread a favorite book from childhood and find that the story feels both identical and completely changed. The words on the page haven't shifted, but your interpretation has. You are reading as both the person you were and the person you've become. The overlap exists not in the book, but in you. The mind holds two truths at once and lets them resonate. Science offers a calm explanation. The brain is a prediction engine. It uses prior knowledge to interpret the present. Most of the time, that process is seamless. You see a chair, you recognize it, you move on. But when the prediction and the perception disagree, the system wavers. Both inputs flash through awareness, creating that uncanny moment where the world feels doubled. It's not evidence of parallel dimensions, just evidence that the mind is constantly blending what it expects with what it encounters. Still, the experience can feel profound. When reality feels like it's folding over itself, people often describe a sense of stillness, as if time has paused. The moment becomes charged, thick with awareness. You might look around, half expecting to catch something flickering between frames. Nothing changes, yet everything feels slightly unstable. Then it passes, leaving behind a faint sense of wonder or unease. Perceptual overlap also shows how flexible the human sense of reality is. The world we experience isn't a raw feed of data. It's a continuous negotiation between input and interpretation. Every sight and sound is filtered through memory and expectation. When those filters misalign, the boundary between worlds, what you remember and what you see, briefly dissolves. The experience reminds us that perception is not fixed. It's a living process, always building, adjusting, and sometimes quietly colliding with itself. You hear a story once, a strange fact, a rumor, or a vivid claim, and it lodges in your mind. Weeks later, you repeat it to someone else. You're sure it's true because you remember it clearly, though you can't recall where you heard it. The person you tell believes you, then passes it on in their own words. Soon, that small fragment of information moves from one mind to another, growing and changing as it travels. This is how a memory virus spreads, not through air or touch, but through language, trust, and repetition. The mind is built for connection. When you share information, your brain rewards you. Each conversation releases signals that strengthen the bond between you and the listener. The same chemicals that make social interaction feel good also make information feel more believable. A memory virus uses that pathway, slipping from brain to brain by riding the natural flow of communication. The more people hear it, the stronger it becomes. Think of a rumor in a small town. It might start as something ordinary, a story about someone getting a promotion or an argument at a cafe. Within days, details change. The story takes on color, emotion, and tension. Each person who retells it adjusts the tone, not to deceive, but to make sense of it. Soon, the original version is gone, replaced by one that feels richer, more memorable, and somehow more true. Memory doesn't just preserve information, it edits for meaning. The result is a mutation, a small shift that helps the idea survive the next retelling. Psychologists call this process transmission error, but that phrase makes it sound mechanical. It's more organic than that. When you recall something, you don't pull out a perfect copy. You reconstruct it. You rebuild the story from fragments, sound, image, and feeling. Every recall is a new version, and every new version carries your personal mark. When others hear it, they rebuild it again. Like a virus, the story replicates through these imperfect copies, changing slightly each time. Some ideas spread faster because they attach to emotion. Fear, surprise, and outrage act as accelerants. A story that frightens or shocks bypasses rational filters. You pass it along before you verify it because sharing feels like protection. Be careful, you tell someone, or you won't believe this. In that moment, you're not spreading falsehood for fun. You're signaling care. The emotion gives the idea a reason to live. The memory virus thrives on this balance, believable enough to accept, emotional enough to remember. History offers countless examples. In the Middle Ages, stories of witchcraft and possession spread across villages, leading entire communities to share the same hallucination of guilt and fear. Today, the same dynamic unfolds online. A headline appears, phrased to provoke. It's shared thousands of times before anyone checks the source. By the time corrections surface, the memory of the original claim has already replicated in millions of minds. The correction rarely spreads as well. Fear and novelty are more contagious than facts. The human brain evolved to prioritize stories that feel useful for survival. This bias once helped us remember which berries were poisonous or which animals to avoid. Now, it makes us vulnerable to misinformation that mimics those warning signals. A rumor about danger, betrayal, or hidden power taps into old instincts. The emotional weight ensures the idea sticks, regardless of accuracy. In this way, modern myths function like cultural pathogens, spreading through shared attention rather than physical proximity. Consider a small, harmless version of this: the misheard lyric. Someone sings a popular song wrong, and soon that version circulates among friends. Even after hearing the real lyrics, people struggle to unlearn the false ones. The brain stores both, but the familiar mistake feels more natural because it fits the rhythm of how it was first learned. A memory virus operates on the same principle. Once an idea fits into an existing mental pattern, it resists correction. The mind protects it as part of its own structure. Media amplifies this effect. Platforms built for engagement reward content that provokes emotion. An article that enrages or delights is shared far more often than one that informs. As people repeat and reshape the content, it mutates. Titles get shortened, quotes get twisted, and context is stripped away. Each version becomes its own host, spreading independently. When someone says, "I read somewhere that," they're passing along the remains of a story that may have changed a dozen times before reaching them. Once an idea spreads widely, it becomes harder to separate it from culture. Take the example of a widely misremembered quote, "Elementary, my dear Watson." Sherlock Holmes never said it in the original books, yet it has become part of the character's identity through films, adaptations, and casual conversation. The line persists because it feels right. The accuracy doesn't matter anymore. The cultural memory of the phrase has replaced the fact. The virus has fully adapted to its host. What makes the memory virus so effective is that it uses the same processes that help us learn. Repetition strengthens neural connections. Emotion tags information as important. Social reinforcement cements belief. These are the mechanisms of education and culture. but they also allow false or distorted memories to spread unchecked. The difference between learning and contagion often lies in verification, a step many people skip because it interrupts the rhythm of sharing. Even when confronted with evidence that disproves a viral idea, the correction rarely erases the original. Studies show that people tend to remember the claim better than the retraction. Once the mental image forms, it stays. The virus doesn't die, it goes dormant, ready to reemerge when triggered by a similar story. That's why old rumors return years later, dressed in new details, but carrying the same emotional DNA. The spread of memory viruses isn't always harmful. Some carry hope, humor, or solidarity. A phrase of encouragement, a comforting myth, or a shared belief in something greater than ourselves can unite people just as effectively as fear divides them. What matters is that these ideas behave like living things, growing, adapting, and surviving by finding hosts willing to carry them. Each of us becomes part of the transmission chain, passing fragments of memory to others, reshaping them as we go. In the end, every culture is built from these shared infections of thought. Myths, sayings, traditions, all began as small stories that caught on. The difference now is speed. In the digital age, the memory virus can circle the planet in seconds. It doesn't need to be true, it only needs to be felt. Once it finds that emotional connection, it travels freely, replicating in the quiet spaces of conversation until it feels less like something we heard and more like something we've always known. You wake up one morning and notice a small change in something you thought was fixed. A landmark looks slightly different, or a product logo has new colors. You ask someone about it, but they don't see what you see. They tell you it's always been that way. You check old photos or documents, and the evidence agrees with them. You start to wonder when the change happened, or if it ever did. It feels as if history has quietly rewritten itself, smoothing over a seam in time that only a few people noticed. This experience captures the idea of a historical phase shift, a moment when the timeline appears to correct itself while life continues as normal. At its simplest, the phase shift means a sudden realignment in a system that was once stable. In physics, it describes how a wave moves out of sync and then locks back into rhythm. When applied to history and memory, it describes how people sense that something in the collective record has shifted position. Nothing seems broken, but the coordinates of familiarity move. The world still makes sense, yet it feels subtly edited. Consider a simple example. Many people remember a famous brand logo with certain colors or shapes that no longer match what exists today. When shown the real version, they experience confusion, even disbelief. They might insist that an older version once existed, but archived material shows no trace of it. To the individual, it feels like the universe performed a quiet correction, as though the past updated to align with a new version of reality. It's unsettling because we expect history to be fixed, not fluid. The same feeling can arise in larger cultural contexts. People might recall events happening in a different order, or even at a different time. A war, a public figure's death, a movie release. Details that seem certain to one group differ for another. Over time, the dominant version solidifies through records, and the alternate version fades into anecdote. To those who remember differently, it feels like they've lived through a historical phase shift, a midstream adjustment to the story of the world. Psychology provides a grounded explanation. Memory isn't a record, it's a reconstruction. Each time you recall something, the brain updates it using the information available now. When society updates its collective understanding, when new evidence emerges or narratives are retold, people unconsciously update their personal memories to match. But sometimes, the update doesn't stick evenly. Some minds retain the older version, while others adopt the new one. The result is a split perception of history, where both versions feel real, depending on who you ask. This becomes clear when looking at how language changes. A phrase that once meant one thing can come to mean another within a generation. If you learned it earlier, your memory of its meaning will differ from those who learned it later. Over time, as dictionaries, media, and conversation reflect the new definition, it feels like reality itself changed its settings. In truth, it was a social update, a historical phase shift encoded in language rather than physics. Technology accelerates this process. Digital media allows history to be rewritten in real time. News articles are updated without notice. Images are edited and re-uploaded. Social platforms erase old posts or replace them with revised versions. For anyone who saw the original, the correction feels like a quiet erasure. When you try to find proof of the earlier version and fail, it creates a dissonance that feels like the world itself has changed its memory. The timeline hasn't shifted, but the archive has. Imagine reading about a political event years later and finding that the dates, quotes, or sequence of actions differ from what you remember. You search for confirmation, but every source agrees on the new version. You can't find any trace of the old one. You start to question whether your memory or the world is wrong. This is where the concept of a phase shift becomes tempting. It offers an explanation that feels equal to the depth of the confusion. The idea that history self-corrects midstream is easier to accept than the idea that your brain silently updated without asking permission. In a broader sense, history itself undergoes constant phase shifts through reinterpretation. A generation re-examines old events with new evidence, rewriting the collective narrative. Monuments come down, textbooks are revised, and public figures once celebrated are recast in a different light. These corrections are deliberate, but from an emotional standpoint, they feel similar to the personal disorientation of a timeline shift. The story that once felt stable suddenly rearranges itself. The past doesn't change in fact, but it does change in meaning. Even science, which prides itself on stability, experiences these shifts. What people once accepted as medical truth or cosmic law can be overturned overnight by new discoveries. Each time, the timeline of knowledge resets. A model that felt certain yesterday becomes obsolete today. To the public, this can feel like reality rewriting itself, a new world emerging beneath the old one while no one was watching. Art and culture mirror this same phenomenon. When a film or song is re-released in a new version, future generations may never experience the original. Over time, the new cut becomes the definitive history. Those who remember the first version describe missing scenes or altered lines, but there's little evidence left to prove it. The cultural record has corrected itself. What remains is a faint unease, a sense that a familiar world has been replaced without warning. Sometimes, this experience happens on a personal scale. You might find an old journal and realize that a memory you've told for years doesn't match what you wrote at the time. Maybe the order of events was reversed, or a detail you were sure of never happened. Reading your own words feels like confronting a stranger's account of your life. The mind, faced with conflicting evidence, performs its own correction. You adjust the story, often without realizing it, until the memory feels stable again. In this way, personal history undergoes the same self-editing process as collective history. The term phase shift captures this balancing act, the adjustment between competing versions of truth. It's not that the world actually jumps between timelines. It's that perception catches up to a new consensus. The shift feels sudden because awareness lags behind reality's ongoing revisions. Once the correction is complete, most people forget there was ever a discrepancy. Only a few hold on to fragments of the old version, wondering when the world decided to change. These experiences remind us that history, both personal and shared, is not as fixed as we want it to be. The records we rely on are human constructions, written, edited, and reinterpreted by minds that are themselves imperfect archives. Each correction, each revision, is a small phase shift in our collective sense of continuity. To live through one is to feel the ground of certainty move just slightly under your feet, while the world carries on as if nothing happened. You walk into a room full of people discussing an event you barely remember. They all agree it happened in a specific way, and though your memory differs, you start to question yourself. You want to fit in, so you nod. Later, when you think about it again, your version of the story has shifted. You remember what they remembered. This is how the consensus illusion works. When agreement itself becomes the proof that something is real. The human brain is wired for social harmony. Long before written history, survival depended on belonging. A lone person could not hunt, build shelter, or defend against threats. Conformity kept the group stable, and those instincts remained strong. When people agree, their shared certainty feels safer than personal doubt. The brain mistakes social validation for truth. The more people who believe something, the more it feels undeniable, even if it isn't. Psychologists call this social proof. It's a mental shortcut the brain uses to decide what's true without checking evidence. If enough people act like something is real, it might as well be. This mechanism keeps societies organized, but also makes them vulnerable to error. False ideas, once repeated and accepted, can gain the same weight as facts. The illusion of consensus becomes indistinguishable from reality. Think about a simple example, the pronunciation of a word. You might grow up saying it one way, certain that it's correct. One day, you hear several people pronounce it differently. At first, you're sure they're wrong, but after hearing it enough times, doubt creeps in. Eventually, you adopt their version, not because you confirmed it, but because the agreement itself convinced you. The consensus became the evidence. This pattern appears everywhere. In workplaces, a mistaken report can spread if no one questions it early. The more colleagues who echo it, the harder it becomes to challenge. In classrooms, a wrong answer repeated with confidence can influence others to match it. Even eyewitnesses in court can adjust their memories after hearing what others saw. Repetition blends with memory until it rewrites it. What began as one person's guess becomes a shared recollection that feels solid. Social media magnifies this process. Online, agreement is visible. Likes, shares, and comments act as signals of approval. The human mind reads those signals as truth. When a post gathers thousands of affirmations, it feels factual regardless of content. People share it to stay aligned with the group. Algorithms reward the spread of engagement, not accuracy. Over time, falsehood and fact spread at the same speed, both powered by the same psychological fuel, agreement. A striking example occurred during early internet debates about the color of a dress. Some saw blue and black, others swore it was white and gold. Each group gathered online, posting proofs and arguments. Within hours, both sides built strong communities convinced of their version. People chose sides based not only on what they saw, but on who they trusted. The visual ambiguity turned into a social certainty. Agreement, not evidence, became the anchor of reality. History shows that consensus illusion shapes culture as much as it distorts it. In every era, societies have held beliefs that later proved false but persisted because they unified people. The Earth at the center of the universe. Illness caused by bad air instead of microbes. These ideas lasted centuries because they created order. Once consensus formed, doubt became dangerous. To question the shared belief was to risk isolation, and isolation felt like death. You can see the same pattern in smaller, everyday situations. Imagine a group of friends recalling a vacation years later. One insists it rained during a hike. Others hesitate, then agree. You remember sunshine, but stay quiet. A few minutes later, you start to picture rain too. The image grows sharper each time it's mentioned. By the end of the conversation, you can almost feel the damp air. The shared story overwrote your private memory. You didn't lie. Your mind rewrote itself to match the group. This process is subtle and automatic. When people speak with confidence, their tone alone triggers trust. The brain equates certainty with truth. If the group echoes that confidence, the illusion deepens. Studies show that hearing a claim repeatedly activates the same regions of the brain as verifying it. Familiarity mimics credibility. Once an idea reaches that point, it becomes self-sustaining. It doesn't need to be true. It only needs to be repeated. Even experts are not immune. In academic research, popular theories can shape decades of study. Young scientists hesitate to challenge established views because reputation and funding depend on consensus. Over time, entire fields can orbit outdated assumptions. The illusion holds until new evidence becomes impossible to ignore. Then the consensus shifts, and everyone wonders how the old view lasted so long. The illusion also operates within personal relationships. Families sometimes share beliefs about themselves that don't match reality. We're not emotional. We're unlucky. We always pull through. These stories shape identity. They hold the group together by providing shared meaning. The truth behind them matters less than the unity they produce. To belong, individuals accept them, and soon the repetition feels like memory rather than myth. The power of consensus illusion lies in its quietness. It doesn't announce itself with conflict. It feels like harmony. People agree, the tension fades, and the shared version of reality takes hold. That calm is deceptive. It makes questioning seem unnecessary. The moment we stop verifying because everyone knows, the illusion completes itself. Agreement becomes proof, and proof becomes memory. In this way, truth is not always what happened, but what survives discussion. When enough people align their recollections, the collective belief hardens into a kind of evidence. It enters textbooks, conversation, and history as fact. The original event may have been different, but the consensus erases the distinction. What remains is the shared comfort of agreement, the illusion that because many believe it, it must exist. You wake up thinking about a conversation from the day before. Something you said felt sharp, or maybe careless, but when you replay it in your mind, it sounds softer now. You remember your tone as calm, your words as more thoughtful. The discomfort fades. By the time you see the person again, your mind has rewritten the moment. This quiet self-editing is an act of retroactive fabrication, the brain's way of reshaping yesterday to protect today. Memory isn't a recording. It's a reconstruction. Every time you recall an event, your brain pulls fragments from storage, sights, sounds, emotions, and rebuilds the moment from pieces. During that process, it smooths the rough edges, replaces uncertainty with clarity, and aligns the story with who you believe you are now. This keeps your sense of identity stable. It allows you to live with your choices, but it also means that your past, as you remember it, is never fixed. Imagine someone who once quit a job in frustration. At the time, they were angry and scared. Years later, when telling the story, they describe it as a moment of courage. Their words aren't dishonest. They simply reflect a new version of the memory, one that fits their present self-image better. The brain retrofits the past to make it consistent with current beliefs. The original feelings still exist somewhere, but they're buried under a layer of narrative repair. This isn't a flaw, it's a defense. The brain edits to protect. Painful memories threaten stability, so the mind reshapes them into manageable forms. After a breakup, someone might remember their partner as colder than they were, or the arguments as worse. The revision reduces the ache. After failure, people often remember circumstances as being stacked against them. The adjustment preserves self-worth. Each edit trades accuracy for comfort. Psychologists call this process memory reconsolidation. Each time we recall a memory, it becomes briefly flexible before the brain stores it again. During that window, new information or emotion can change its shape. If guilt or shame intrudes, the mind may soften details to reduce distress. If pride grows, it might amplify success. Over years, these small adjustments accumulate. The person you are today doesn't just remember your past, it curates it. Sometimes retroactive fabrication happens on a group level. A family might recall a difficult period and tell it as a story of strength. The hardships get edited down to a single narrative of unity. In workplaces or nations, collective memory works the same way. People remember victories, not the mistakes that preceded them. The timeline bends toward pride because shared identity depends on it. When individuals participate in these retellings, they internalize the revised version as their own. You can see this mechanism in how people talk about their childhood. Many adults say their parents were always supportive or always strict, even if the reality was mixed. Memory simplifies complexity into themes. The mind prefers coherence. A nuanced truth that someone was both kind and flawed is harder to carry than a single stable image. Retroactive fabrication streamlines that burden. It turns contradiction into story. Technology amplifies this process. Photos, posts, and messages resurface old moments, but each time we revisit them, we reinterpret. You might see a picture of yourself smiling during a stressful year and start to believe it wasn't so bad after all. The image becomes proof of a better memory. In another case, an argument captured in text may seem harsher years later, reshaping how you remember the relationship. The digital archive feels objective, but your interpretation shifts every time you scroll through it. The mind still edits even when the data stays the same. The same effect appears in public events. People often remember predictions or opinions differently after the outcome is known. This is hindsight bias, the belief that they knew it all along. The brain edits uncertainty out of the past, reinforcing a sense of control. The correction isn't malicious, it's an automatic form of self-assurance. Knowing you once doubted or hesitated can feel threatening. So memory rephrases your role to match how you wish you had been. There are moments when this protective editing becomes visible. A person confronted with evidence that contradicts their memory, a message, a photo, a diary entry, may feel confusion or even anger. The new evidence threatens the narrative the brain worked hard to preserve. Defensiveness is often a sign that retroactive fabrication has taken place. The mind resists updates that would reopen emotional wounds. It prefers a coherent falsehood to a painful truth. Yet these internal edits aren't always negative. They can help people survive trauma. Someone who lived through a frightening event might remember it as less chaotic than it was. The memory loses intensity over time, allowing healing to happen. The brain dampens sensory details and reframes outcomes to protect emotional balance. Without that process, some memories would remain unbearable. Retroactive fabrication is part of resilience, a quiet tool for preserving continuity in the face of disruption. Everyday life is filled with smaller examples. You recall an argument with a friend and remember yourself as more patient. You look back on a risk you took and forget how scared you were. You describe a success as entirely your doing, overlooking the help you received. None of this is deliberate deceit. It's narrative maintenance. The present self updates the past to support the version of you that's needed today. Over time, these edits form a patchwork that feels seamless. The person you remember being may never have existed exactly as you recall, but that version allows you to keep moving forward without breaking under the weight of contradiction. Memory doesn't store the past as it happened. It stores the past as it must be to make sense of now. Each recollection is an act of quiet revision. Each revision, a small negotiation between truth and peace. You open your phone and scroll through familiar headlines. They all sound right, comforting, familiar, and predictable. Every article matches what you already believe. The comments agree. The tone feels familiar, and the rhythm of certainty wraps around you like a blanket. Nothing seems false, but nothing challenges you either. This is what it feels like to live inside a digital echo chamber, a space where algorithms quietly feed you back your own ideas until they harden into collective memory. The internet began as a vast network of voices. It promised access to every viewpoint and fact. But over time, the systems designed to manage that information learned to prioritize engagement over variety. Each click, like, or share teaches the algorithm what keeps you on the screen. The result isn't a neutral feed of information. It's a personalized reflection of what you already think. You don't see the full conversation. You see the version that keeps you scrolling. When millions of people live inside these personalized loops, the line between truth and familiarity begins to blur. What feels widely accepted may only exist inside one digital cluster. The illusion of consensus becomes self-sustaining. When enough people see the same version of reality, it starts to feel like the only version. Algorithms don't just show us content, they shape memory by repetition. Every recommendation acts like a whisper saying, "This is what everyone knows." Consider how social platforms filter news. Two people can read about the same event and come away with completely different impressions because the system tailored their feeds to different emotional tones. One sees outrage, the other sees reassurance. The algorithm doesn't care which version is true. It cares which one keeps attention. Over time, each person builds a mental archive that reinforces their own emotional truth. When they talk to each other later, it's as if they lived in separate worlds. The brain favors confirmation. It finds comfort in agreement and unease in contradiction. The algorithm exploits that bias by showing you what aligns with your expectations. If you watch a video about a conspiracy theory, you'll be shown more of them. If you read an article that questions that theory, you'll see similar skepticism. In both cases, the system strengthens the signal it detects. What begins as curiosity becomes conviction. The repetition turns possibility into memory. Imagine a person who remembers a quote from a famous movie that never existed. They post it online and others respond, "Yes, I remember that too." The post spreads, boosted by the platform because engagement is high. Soon, more people think it is true. Enough people act as a whisper, and endlessly more gets to an echo chamber. Thousands agree on the false quote. People create memes and fake screenshots to match it. Search engines pick up the phrase, further validating it. Within days, the false memory becomes part of digital culture. The algorithm didn't create the error, but it multiplied it. This process mirrors how human memory already works. We tend to remember the stories we repeat. Online, repetition happens faster and louder. Each share reactivates the memory, making it feel fresher and truer. Psychologists call this the illusory truth effect. Familiarity feels like accuracy. In the echo chamber, that effect becomes amplified. The platform delivers a steady rhythm of validation, and the mind, designed to find patterns, mistakes that rhythm for reality. The digital echo chamber doesn't need to deceive intentionally. It simply magnifies what people already believe. A person who thinks a certain product is unsafe will see reviews and videos that confirm it. Another person who thinks it's safe will see the opposite. The difference in information becomes a difference in memory. Each group remembers its own version of events. When they meet, they can't agree on what happened because they never experienced the same digital world. You can see this in how online communities form. A rumor begins, a misinterpretation of a study, a false headline, a mistranslated quote. A few accounts repeat it, and the system measures the surge in engagement. Without human judgment, the algorithm assumes the story matters. It spreads further. Soon it appears everywhere inside that network. The users take its ubiquity as evidence of truth. The collective memory solidifies not through evidence, but through exposure. Even attempts to correct falsehoods can reinforce them. When a fact-checking article appears, it uses the same keywords as the false claim, causing the algorithm to connect them. People searching for the false claim see both, but the repetition makes both seem familiar. The correction enters the same echo chamber as the original error, and both persist. The memory doesn't vanish, it splits into versions. Each one survives in its own network of agreement. This environment changes how people remember not just facts, but emotions. The feed learns what upsets or inspires you and delivers more of it. Over time, your emotional map of the world becomes algorithmic. You might feel constant outrage or constant fear without realizing those feelings were curated for you. Memory stores emotion alongside information, so these digital moods become part of how you recall events. You don't just remember what happened, you remember how the platform made you feel about it. In earlier times, collective memory formed through shared experiences, news on television, stories from family, public events. Now it forms through data sorting. Millions of small, private realities merge into fragmented versions of the past. A historical event might exist in dozens of digital narratives, each convincing to those inside it. When people talk about what really happened, they're often referring to the version their algorithm built for them. What makes the digital echo chamber powerful is its invisibility. You rarely notice the filtering because it feels natural. The content matches your thoughts so precisely that it seems organic, even intimate. But that precision comes at a cost. It isolates you within your own pattern of belief, surrounding you with echoes of yourself. Over time, those echoes become memory, not of what was true, but of what was repeated until it felt true. Inside this feedback loop, false collective memories grow like living organisms. Each share is a heartbeat, each comment a breath. The system doesn't know the difference between truth and fiction, only between engagement and silence. And so the illusion expands, not because anyone intends it to, but because the digital world rewards the comfort of agreement more than the friction of doubt. You see an old photograph and remember the day it was taken. You recall the place, the people, and even the scent of the air. But as you linger on the image, you notice what actually returns to you first isn't the scene itself, it's the feeling. You remember being happy or nervous or lonely. The emotion rises before the details, shaping how the memory unfolds. That is emotional indexing, the process by which the brain stores and retrieves memories according to how they felt, not what they factually were. The brain organizes experience through emotion because emotion signals importance. It marks events that matter for survival. A neutral day at the office might fade quickly, but a moment of embarrassment or affection will persist for years. Feelings act like tags in a mental archive. When you later encounter something similar, a smell, a tone of voice, a song, the tag activates and the associated memory returns. The accuracy of the details isn't what triggers recall, it's the emotional resonance. Think about a childhood moment. You might not remember what was said, but you remember how you felt: safe, scolded, or proud. Those sensations become the hooks that pull the rest of the memory into focus. If your emotional state changes when recalling it, the story can change too. When you're happy, you might remember the laughter in that scene. When you're sad, you might recall the silence instead. The emotion acts as a filter, adjusting what comes forward. Scientists studying memory call this affective encoding. When an experience carries strong emotion, the amygdala, the brain's emotional center, works with the hippocampus to prioritize storage. The result is that emotionally charged memories endure, while neutral ones fade. The problem is that emotion also colors interpretation. The stronger the feeling, the less objective the record becomes. Memory stores not just what happened, but what it meant to you at that moment. You can see this process at work in relationships. Two people can recall the same argument with opposite emotional tones. One remembers anger, the other remembers hurt. They might even agree on the words spoken, but the feeling each one stored shapes how they retell the story. Later, when they revisit the memory, those emotional anchors guide which details resurface. For one, the raised voice becomes central. For the other, the moment of withdrawal. Both are true within their emotional logic, but neither is a complete record. The same mechanism explains why nostalgia often distorts the past. When people look back fondly on earlier times, they recall the emotional warmth of youth, not the daily frustrations. The feeling of safety or simplicity becomes the structure of the memory. The hardships fade because they carry less pleasant emotional weight. Memory, shaped by mood, edits the past to fit the present sense of self. The remembered world isn't false, it's emotionally optimized. Emotional indexing also explains why trauma can feel so vivid. Negative emotion anchors memory with extraordinary strength. Fear, shame, or grief mark moments as permanently relevant. Even when time passes, those tags keep reactivating. A sound or smell can bring the body back into the old emotional state instantly, even if the person can't recall the event itself in detail. The emotional code remains intact, outlasting the factual one. At the opposite extreme, emotional detachment weakens memory. When something feels unimportant, the brain doesn't invest effort in storing it. That's why many daily routines blur together. Without an emotional signal to highlight them, they fade into the background. We forget, not because the memory failed, but because the experience lacked the emotional charge that tells the brain, remember this. Technology and media take advantage of emotional indexing constantly. Advertisements, political messaging, and social content are designed to trigger emotional reactions. Anger and amusement make people more likely to share information. When the emotion repeats, the association deepens. You might not remember the exact data, but you remember how it made you feel. Over time, that feeling becomes the fact. People claim, "I know this is true," when what they really mean is, "this feels true." Imagine seeing a news story that provokes outrage. The anger cements the event in memory, but if the story later turns out to be false, the emotional tag remains stronger than the correction. Even after learning the truth, the brain can't easily unlink the feeling from the topic. The emotion outlives the fact. This is why misinformation spreads so easily online. Emotional indexing ensures that the first feeling you attach to a subject becomes the default reference point, regardless of accuracy. Personal memory follows the same rule. After an accomplishment, people remember pride more clearly than the sequence of events. After a failure, they remember shame more vividly than the cause. Over time, these emotional tags build the framework of identity. When people describe who they are, they often list not the facts of their lives, but the feelings that define them. Moments of courage, love, loss, or fear. Emotional indexing isn't just how we remember, it's how we construct a sense of continuity. There's an everyday example in music. A song tied to a breakup can make someone cry years later, even if the lyrics don't fit the situation anymore. The melody acts as a trigger, reactivating the emotional tag. The brain doesn't replay the factual memory of the event. It replays the feeling of heartbreak. The person might not even think about their former partner. What returns is the mood itself, the emotional context preserved apart from the story. This process shapes social memory too. Entire communities form shared recollections based on emotional experience rather than documentation. A nation might collectively remember a period as golden or tragic, depending on how it felt to live through it, regardless of what statistics show. The emotional consensus becomes cultural truth. Generations inherit not the data, but the feeling, repeating it through language, art, and ritual until it becomes part of identity. Emotional indexing explains why memory feels both personal and unreliable. It prioritizes significance over precision. The mind isn't trying to record history. It's trying to maintain coherence. Every recollection is an act of self-preservation disguised as storytelling. When we think we're retrieving facts, we're often retrieving emotions. The feeling comes first, the details follow, and together they create the version of the past that lets us keep living comfortably in the present. You look at an old photograph and remember the day it was taken. The image feels solid, but the memory that rises behind it shifts slightly each time you return to it. Some details sharpen, others fade. A joke you once thought was said before the photo was taken now feels like it happened after. The sequence changes without warning. Each act of remembering alters what is remembered. It's as if the memory waits to take shape until you look at it. This idea that observation determines which version of the past becomes real captures what we can call quantum recall. The name comes from a comparison to physics, where observation affects outcome. In a quantum experiment, a particle exists in many possible states until it is measured. Only then does it appear in one definite form. Memory behaves in a similar way. Each stored experience holds multiple versions, emotional, visual, narrative, all coexisting until you focus on one. The moment you recall it, your attention collapses the possibilities into a single version. But that version isn't fixed. It changes slightly with each observation. Imagine three friends recalling the same road trip. One remembers laughter and open windows. Another remembers long silences. The third swears it rained most of the drive. None of them are lying. Each time they've told the story, their minds have reinforced one version of the event and weakened others. Each retelling functions like a measurement, an act that solidifies a specific past. The trip itself hasn't changed, but the remembered past has branched. Psychologists understand this as memory reconsolidation. Every time you access a memory, it becomes temporarily unstable. While it's active, your current mood, beliefs, and expectations influence how it's rewritten before the brain stores it again. If you feel peaceful, the same event may take on warmth. If you feel anxious, it might seem tense or foreboding. Over years, this process builds a network of alternate memories, all linked to the same moment, but each shaped by the observer you were when recalling it. In that sense, we never remember the original event. We remember the last version we recalled. Like editing a digital file and saving it over the original, each retrieval replaces the past with the newest draft. The changes may be small, but they accumulate. The more often you revisit a memory, the farther it drifts from what actually happened. Recollection doesn't preserve history, it rewrites it. Think about how people recall shared experiences differently after time passes. Two siblings might argue over who broke a window years ago. Each is sure they remember correctly. Each has told their version enough times to others that it now feels absolute. The truth may be unknowable, not because one of them lies, but because both have created self-consistent worlds around their chosen memories. Observation, in this case, defines reality. The remembered event behaves like a quantum particle, existing in many potential histories until observed from a particular angle. Even sensory memories show this instability. You might swear you remember the color of a car or the sound of a voice exactly, yet those sensory details fade quickly and are replaced by symbolic versions. The car becomes red, though it may have been maroon or rust. The voice becomes gentle, though the tone can't be recalled perfectly. When you summon the memory, the brain fills in missing data using general patterns from similar experiences. The act of observation doesn't reveal the past, it recreates it. Technology reinforces this effect. Every digital photo, every recorded message becomes an anchor for reinterpretation. When you look back at an image, you don't remember the moment it was taken. You remember the last time you looked at it. Each viewing overlays new emotions and context. A picture once filled with joy can later feel sad because you know what came after. The photograph hasn't changed, but its meaning collapses into a new emotional state every time you observe it. Quantum recall also appears in collective memory. When a community revisits a public event, a disaster, a protest, a victory, the shared recollection evolves with each discussion. People rewrite the story to match current values and understanding. Over decades, history itself becomes a living memory, shaped by who observes it and how. New generations look back and collapse the countless potential meanings into the version that fits their worldview. Observation at a societal level selects which past survives. The phenomenon also explains why forgotten memories can resurface in unexpected ways. A smell or sound may trigger a version of the past that contradicts your usual recollection. For a moment, you hold two timelines in mind, the one you've told yourself for years and the one that suddenly feels more vivid. Both are real in the sense that both were constructed from genuine fragments. The mind flickers between them before settling on one to keep. That moment of uncertainty is the mental equivalent of watching reality choose a state. Emotion adds another layer to this process. When a memory carries strong feeling, it becomes easier to recall, but also more prone to distortion. The emotion acts as a lens, magnifying certain details while erasing others. The same event recalled in anger or forgiveness produces different pasts. If you've ever looked back on a painful experience after healing, you know how different it feels. The facts may remain, but the meaning shifts completely. Observation redefines not only what happened, but why it matters. Quantum recall suggests that the past is not fixed in the mind, but fluid, constantly redefined by the observer's present state. Each act of remembering is an experiment with unpredictable results. You bring your current beliefs, relationships, and needs into the process, and the memory aligns itself accordingly. What you retrieve feels authentic because it reflects who you are now, not who you were then. The observation gives the memory shape, and that shape becomes, for the moment, your truth. The next time you look at an old photograph or retell a story, notice how the details bend slightly toward the present. You might remember something you were sure you'd forgotten, or notice that a familiar image now carries a new mood. That quiet adjustment isn't error, it's how the mind maintains coherence across time. Observation doesn't just record the past, it chooses it, one recall at a time, turning possibility into memory. You hear a word you've known your whole life, but it feels different somehow. The meaning has shifted, the tone changed. You remember when it carried another weight, sharper, deeper, or kinder, but now people use it casually, even carelessly. The language moved, and your memory stayed still. This is what happens during linguistic ghosting, when words evolve faster than memory can adapt, leaving behind traces of meanings that no longer fit the present. Language is alive. It changes through use, not design. Each generation reshapes words to match its reality. Meanings drift, pronunciations soften, and phrases once powerful become faint echoes. But while speech changes quickly, personal memory does not. The words we learned in childhood carry emotional imprints, the tone of a parent, the mood of a classroom, the rhythm of conversation. When the words evolve, those emotional memories cling to the older versions. The result is a quiet disconnect between the world we speak and the one we remember. Consider the word literally. It once meant something precise, in a literal sense. Over time, people began using it to emphasize exaggeration. I was literally dying of laughter. The older meaning still exists, but its certainty has faded. Someone raised on the older usage might wince hearing the newer one, not because it's wrong, but because it feels like a ghost of something familiar. The mind remembers one landscape of meaning, while the living language has moved on to another. This process happens constantly, in small, unnoticed ways. Words like awful, terrific, and gay all once meant something different. Over centuries, their meanings reversed or expanded. Today's speakers use them without hesitation, while older speakers carry older emotional maps. The word acts as a bridge between generations, but also a fault line. When two people use the same word but mean different things, they experience the ghosting effect, one speaking from the present, the other from the past. The reason this feels unsettling is that memory ties language to emotion. The words we use to describe love, grief, fear, and belonging form part of how we store those experiences. When the language changes, it can feel as though the memories themselves are shifting. A phrase that once felt tender may now sound distant when ironic. A word that carried comfort may now sound clinical. The meaning didn't vanish, it migrated, leaving the emotional version suspended in the mind like residue. Imagine reading a diary you wrote 10 years ago. You recognize every word, but the tone sounds foreign. You didn't intend to sound old-fashioned, but language has moved enough that your past voice feels ghostly. It's not just that your vocabulary changed. Your emotional relationship to those words did. What once felt honest now reads as dramatic or naive. You meet an earlier version of yourself through the fossilized remains of your own speech. Technology accelerates this process. Online platforms spread slang, memes, and phrases globally in days. New words appear, peak, and vanish within months. The internet archives them all, so you can watch meanings mutate in real time. Phrases like canceled, based, or simp can shift tone completely depending on context and year. What was once ironic becomes serious. What was once mocking becomes affectionate. The digital record preserves every stage of the change, but the mind can't keep up. When we revisit old posts or conversations, we find ourselves haunted by linguistic versions that no longer match how we think. Social identity also shapes linguistic ghosting. Groups evolve shared vocabularies that strengthen belonging. When members leave or time passes, those words become emotional triggers. A soldier hearing military slang years after service might feel a rush of memory, not from the word's meaning, but from its sound. The language activates a network of emotion frozen in time. The same applies to dialects, regional idioms, or the phrases of a friendship group that once defined intimacy. The words outlive the world they described. This ghosting isn't only nostalgic. It can cause confusion and even conflict. When people disagree about meaning, they're often defending memories, not definitions. A word like respect may mean obedience in one generation and mutual understanding in another. A debate over what's been lost in language often masks a deeper discomfort, that the emotional landscape built around those words no longer aligns with how others see the world. The ghost of old language isn't gone. It lingers between interpretations. Writers and translators feel this phenomenon keenly. When translating older texts, they must decide whether to honor the historical meaning or adjust to modern usage. A simple word like passion once meant suffering, tied to its Latin root. In modern use, it often means desire or enthusiasm. To keep the original sense alive, a translator must balance fidelity and comprehension, preserving the ghost without confusing the reader. Each choice reveals how language carries both life and residue. On a smaller scale, we perform the same translation in our own minds. When someone says, "I love you," we interpret it through the accumulated weight of every time we've heard or said those words before. The meaning changes depending on who speaks, how it's spoken, and what version of the word our memory still holds. Language doesn't just express emotion, it reactivates it. Every word arrives wrapped in echoes of its past uses, some of which no longer belong to the present speaker. You can see linguistic ghosting in how children and parents miscommunicate. A parent might use a word like cute with affection, while a teenager hears it as condescending. The gap isn't just generational, it's temporal. Each learned the word in a different emotional era. Their conversation overlaps in sound, but not in meaning. The ghosts of past definitions drift quietly between them, shaping tone and misunderstanding. Even within the same person, language moves faster than reflection. You might catch yourself using slang you once mocked or avoiding a word that now feels loaded. The change happens before you notice. When you do notice, it feels like encountering your own ghost, the version of you who used those words confidently, unaware of how they'd age. The realization that your language has evolved without your consent reveals how much of identity is tied to speech. Linguistic ghosting shows that memory doesn't just record events, it records vocabulary. Words anchor moments in emotional time. When they change, the memories attached to them start to drift. We continue to use language as though it were stable, but beneath every sentence lies a layer of shifting history. Each word we speak carries an unseen echo, the ghost of what it used to mean, following just a step behind. You remember a moment, but not directly. You remember what it meant. The event itself fades, replaced by a story, that captures its essence more cleanly than the experience ever did. The meaning stands in for the memory. Over time, that substitution becomes invisible. You believe you're recalling the real thing, but what survives is only the symbol. This is symbolic substitution, when meaning overtakes memory and becomes the thing we remember instead of the thing that happened. The mind simplifies to survive. Experience is messy. Sensations, words, movement, emotion. To store it all would be chaos, so the brain compresses it into summaries. A fight becomes the day I learned to stand up for myself. A heartbreak becomes the moment I grew stronger. The details dissolve into the lesson. We remember the symbolic version because it's easier to hold. The cost of clarity is the loss of texture. Consider how a child remembers moving to a new home. At the time, the experience was confusing and overwhelming. There were boxes, car rides, goodbyes. Years later, when the child is grown, that memory has condensed into a feeling of displacement, or maybe resilience. The emotional pattern remains, but the sensory reality is gone. What the person remembers isn't the move, but what it came to represent. The event is no longer an event. It's an emblem. This process shapes every part of identity. People use stories to define who they are, and stories rely on meaning more than accuracy. Ask someone about their past, and you'll hear structure. Lessons learned, causes and effects, turning points. Real life is rarely that organized. The mind edits to make it coherent. It replaces fragments of reality with symbols that express the truth of experience rather than its literal form. We don't remember life as it was. We remember what it stood for. You can see symbolic substitution in cultural memory too. Historical events are remembered less as complex realities and more as simplified symbols. Wars become stories of heroism or tragedy. Movements become tales of justice or rebellion. Over time, those meanings harden into national myths. The symbols take over, and the actual details, the uncertainty, the moral ambiguity, the personal contradictions, fade into the background. A culture remembers its symbols and forgets the complexity that gave them birth. In personal life, the same dynamic appears in grief. When someone dies, our memory of them changes over time. The small, ordinary moments, their tone of voice, their habits, blur. What remains is the symbolic figure, the one who taught me patience, the person who always believed in me. The meaning becomes the memorial. It comforts because it's stable, even if it no longer matches the person as they were. Symbolic substitution transforms loss into narrative, pain into pattern. Language accelerates the shift. Words are symbols by nature, and when we describe experience, we compress reality into them. Once an event is spoken, it begins to live as a symbol in conversation, rather than as a sensory record in memory. Each retelling pushes it further toward abstraction. The phrase, "the time I failed," replaces the images, sounds, and feelings of the actual day. Eventually, the story becomes shorthand, an efficient label for something that once was alive. You can watch this happen in relationships. Two people share a difficult period. Later, when they talk about it, they start using phrases like, "when things were bad," or "back when we struggled." Those words flatten months of complexity into a few syllables. They no longer recall the specific nights, the small reconciliations, the half-spoken fears. Symbol does the work of memory. They don't need to revisit the raw experience because the phrase has taken its place. Symbolic substitution also drives how people remember achievements. The degree, the medal, the certificate. These become the symbols that replace the long, uneven process that led to them. You remember finishing the race, not the training, receiving the diploma, not the years of exhaustion. The symbol is easier to hold than the process. When people display awards or photos, they aren't preserving the past so much as preserving the symbol that now carries it. This exchange between meaning and memory happens unconsciously. The mind doesn't ask permission to simplify. It trades accuracy for coherence, and meaning becomes the container that holds experience. The shift can be comforting. It allows you to say, "That mistake taught me something," instead of living with endless uncertainty. It provides closure, even if it isn't literal truth. Memory bends toward meaning because meaning keeps the narrative of self intact. Over time, symbolic substitution can make some memories feel more vivid than others. The symbol is polished by repetition, while unprocessed experiences fade. A single phrase, "the best summer of my life," can replace hundreds of moments that no longer exist in detail. When you try to recall the actual days, you find only fragments, yet the phrase feels true. The symbol has absorbed the emotional reality of the time, even if none of its specifics survive. In social contexts, shared symbols perform the same function. A generation remembers 9/11 or the pandemic, not as full histories, but as containers for collective emotion. People can talk about these symbols and immediately access shared feelings without revisiting personal events. The symbol stands for countless individual memories that no longer need to be recalled separately. The collective meaning overwrites the private details. The danger of symbolic substitution is that it can disguise forgetting as understanding. When a symbol becomes too strong, it can block access to the experience it represents. A person might say, "That was when I realized I was strong," and never again question whether that strength was mixed with fear or confusion. The symbol protects, but also simplifies. It's an efficient memory, but an incomplete one. Still, symbolic substitution is part of how we make sense of life. The brain can't store everything, so it turns experience into language, images, and lessons. These become the scaffolding of identity. What we call memory is often a web of symbols arranged to tell a coherent story about who we are and what we've learned. Beneath those symbols, the original moments still exist, faint, unstable, and unreachable, replaced by meaning that now does the remembering for us. You remember something clearly. You've talked about it with others, and they remember it too. There's agreement, confidence, even comfort in the shared certainty. Then you find out it never happened that way. The realization feels disorienting, almost physical. You doubt your own mind, yet part of you still insists the memory is true. What you've experienced is mass cognitive resonance. When shared belief strengthens false remembrance until it feels undeniable. Memory is social. We think of it as a private record, but much of what we remember is shaped by interaction. When people tell stories together, they build alignment. They reinforce certain details and ignore others. The more often a version of a story is repeated, the more it becomes the accepted one. Over time, that version replaces individual memories, creating a collective narrative that feels real because it is shared. Agreement becomes evidence. You can see this in small groups first. Imagine a group of friends recalling a night out years ago. One of them says a song was playing when something funny happened. Another agrees, even if they didn't notice the song. Soon, everyone remembers it. The detail didn't come from direct recall. It came from the suggestion, repeated and accepted. Each person's brain records the shared version as their own. The next time they remember it, that version is the only one that exists. Psychologists have studied this through what's called the social contagion of memory. In experiments, groups of people view the same event, for example, a short film, and later discuss it. When one participant confidently adds a false detail, others often absorb it without question. Later, even when shown the original footage, some participants insist the false detail was there. The shared confidence overrides individual evidence. Belief becomes louder than observation. This effect scales easily. In large groups, it creates collective misremembering, the foundation of the Mandela Effect. When many people recall the same incorrect detail, like a logo or a line from a movie, it feels less like confusion and more like proof. People say, "We can't all be wrong." But in truth, the number of believers has no bearing on accuracy. The shared conviction itself creates emotional reinforcement. The mind takes consensus as validation. Part of this comes from the way humans use social agreement as a shortcut for truth. In daily life, consensus is often reliable. If several people see rain outside, you trust that it's raining. But memory doesn't follow the same rules as perception. Memory is reconstructive, built each time it's recalled. When those reconstructions merge through conversation or media, the group unknowingly edits the collective version together. The harmony of belief produces resonance, a mental feedback loop that amplifies the false note until it drowns out the real one. Social media magnifies this process. Online platforms reward repetition and agreement. When thousands of people post the same mistaken detail, it becomes a form of evidence through exposure. The brain treats frequency as credibility. You see the same false claim enough times, and it starts to feel familiar, and familiarity feels true. Algorithms enhance the illusion by feeding users content that aligns with what they already believe. The result is digital resonance, the rapid synchronization of memory across vast groups who never met. Emotion strengthens the effect even more. Memories tied to emotion feel more vivid, regardless of their accuracy. If a collective belief evokes nostalgia, fear, or pride, it locks more tightly in place. People are less likely to question something that feels emotionally meaningful. This is why false recollections often cluster around cultural touchstones, songs, movies, public tragedies. The emotion surrounding those events helps stabilize the false detail inside the group memory. Think about how people remember national events. A generation might recall where they were when they heard important news. Over time, they retell the story in nearly identical ways, using shared phrases. The event becomes part of identity. Then, if someone presents evidence that the detail they recall is wrong, a different time, a different image, a different quote, the correction feels personal, almost like an attack. The collective memory carries emotional truth, and that truth outweighs factual precision. Mass cognitive resonance doesn't require deception. It happens naturally whenever people seek coherence together. Groups prefer a unified memory over a fractured one. When uncertainty appears, they smooth it out through repetition. Each retelling synchronizes belief a little more, until individual variations vanish. In this sense, false memories spread not because of manipulation, but because of empathy. People want to belong to the same story. There's an example in how families remember their history. One generation tells stories about an ancestor, maybe a hero or a founder. Over time, the tale grows simpler and more flattering. New details appear: bravery in battle, kindness to strangers, wisdom in leadership. The specifics change, but the moral stays the same. Each generation accepts and repeats the version that fits the family's sense of self. The ancestor becomes a symbol rather than a person. What began as a handful of facts transforms into shared legend. The same mechanism explains why crowds often recall moments of awe or terror differently than what cameras later show. During intense collective experiences, concerts, protests, disasters, the brain prioritizes emotional coherence over sensory precision. It syncs with the group's mood. When people later describe what they saw, their accounts align not because they're accurate, but because their emotions resonated. The collective feeling dictates the shared memory. Mass cognitive resonance shows how truth can bend under the weight of shared certainty. The more people agree on a false memory, the stronger it becomes. Repetition, emotion, and social validation fuse into conviction. Once the resonance takes hold, evidence struggles to compete with the comfort of consensus. A false memory, supported by many minds, can feel more stable than a true one remembered alone. The phenomenon reminds us that memory is never isolated. It grows through connection, conversation, and confirmation. The same forces that build culture and community also shape what we believe to be real. Each story we share carries a small risk of distortion, but also the reason memory exists at all: to link us together. When belief resonates across enough minds, it doesn't just describe reality, it creates a version of it that becomes impossible to distinguish from truth. You recall a moment that no longer fits cleanly in time. It feels recent and distant at once. The people in it seem older or younger than they should be. The memory exists, but it doesn't match the order of things as you know them. This is a temporal palimpsest, when old memories bleed through the rewritten layers of the mind's timeline. Like ink that refuses to stay buried, past versions of experience surface beneath the newer ones, blurring the line between what happened and what replaced it. Memory isn't a linear archive. It's more like a manuscript written and rewritten over years. Each revision adds clarity to some parts and erases others, but traces of the original always remain. When we remember, we aren't reading the final draft. We're reading a page covered in edits, where older sentences still show faintly through the newer words. The mind tries to maintain a coherent narrative, but time doesn't cooperate. The result is a layered record, one moment overlapping another. Imagine a person revisiting the town where they grew up. The streets look different, but as they walk, two versions of the place coexist. A new cafe stands where an old store once was. For a second, the mind sees both. The present and the remembered past occupy the same space, flickering between each other. That sensation, the brief collision of timelines, is a mental palimpsest. The older memory hasn't disappeared. It's been overwritten, but not erased. This overlap can appear in small, everyday moments. You might enter a room and feel a flash of familiarity without knowing why. The scent or light matches a memory your conscious mind can't place. That faint echo of recognition is an old layer pushing through. The current experience triggers a stored pattern, and for a second, your sense of time folds. You're here and there, now and then. In the same breath, psychologists explain this through pattern matching. The brain uses stored templates to interpret new experiences. When a present scene resembles a past one, the older template activates automatically. The mind then fuses the two, creating a composite perception. Most of the time, the blend goes unnoticed. But when the mismatch is strong enough, it creates dissonance, a flicker of two realities competing for recognition. You feel memory and perception collide. Temporal palimpsests become clearer during emotional reflection. People often revise how they remember life events based on what they've learned since. A relationship that once felt happy might later seem troubled when viewed through hindsight. The new interpretation overlays the old, but the earlier emotional truth doesn't vanish. You can still feel its trace underneath. That's why remembering certain events can feel double. Both the innocence of what you thought then and the awareness you carry now. Writing in journals or looking at old letters can trigger this effect strongly. You see your younger voice describing a world that no longer exists, yet you remember being that person. The gap between the two versions of yourself becomes visible. Reading the old words is like uncovering text beneath scraped parchment. You sense how much of your current identity was written over older drafts. The past isn't gone, it lingers beneath the surface, influencing how new memories are written. Trauma reveals the palimpsest most clearly. People who have lived through intense events often describe layered memories. One calm version told in conversation, another raw version that resurfaces in dreams or sensations. The mind rewrites the experience to make it bearable, but fragments of the original still leak through. A smell, a sound, or a texture can reopen the buried layer without warning. The rewritten timeline can't hold completely. The ink seeps back. History itself behaves the same way. Societies rewrite their timelines constantly. Textbooks are updated, monuments removed, names changed. But beneath every revision, older narratives persist in memory, art, and rumor. When cultural debates flare over the meaning of the past, what's really happening is a collective palimpsest becoming visible. A new version of history is never clean. It rests uneasily over the ghost of the previous one. Each generation writes its truth on top of what came before, but traces always remain. Technology amplifies this experience. Old photos, social media posts, and digital archives preserve snapshots of earlier versions of life. When they resurface, they clash with the person you are now. You recognize yourself, yet you feel detached, like watching a character you once played. The image is fixed in time, but your perception of it keeps changing. The digital record acts like a layer of ink that never fades, even as your internal timeline keeps rewriting itself. Memory editing happens even in small choices. When you tell a story about your past, you emphasize certain parts and leave others out. The act of telling rewrites the memory. Later, when you recall it again, you're remembering the story, not the event. But some old detail, a glance, a smell, a feeling, sometimes returns unexpectedly, reminding you that the original still exists beneath the narrative. The polished version and the raw fragment coexist, 2 times layered on one page. You can see temporal palimpsest in how people reconcile contradictions in their past. Someone might say they've forgiven an old hurt, yet feel anger when reminded of it. Both versions, forgiveness and pain, occupy the same mental space. The conscious mind accepts the rewrite, but the older layer remains active. Emotional memory resists erasure, even when intellectual memory has moved on. The self becomes a collection of overlapping drafts, each one influencing the next. The concept also applies to perception of public time. During major world events, people form strong emotional memories that anchor them in context, where they were, who they were with. Years later, those moments are remembered through the lens of what followed. The emotion of the original remains, but the interpretation changes. The world rewrites its timeline, but individuals still carry the earlier script inside them. The overlap between private and public memory creates a shared palimpsest, personal history bleeding into collective one. The mind's need for order keeps rewriting, but it never fully deletes. Beneath every current version of memory lies a faint trace of what came before, still whispering through the layers. Each recollection is both an update and a rediscovery, the present trying to overwrite the past, and the past quietly writing itself back in. You sit down to remember something important: the face of someone you loved, the sound of a room long gone, the exact words spoken in a moment that mattered. You focus hard, trying to see it clearly. But as you do, it begins to change. The more you examine the memory, the less certain it feels. You fix one detail, and another slips away. You're not just recalling it, you're reshaping it. This is the observer's paradox of memory. The idea that studying a memory alters the memory itself. Every act of remembering is also an act of reconstruction. The mind doesn't store moments like files waiting to be opened. It rebuilds them each time from fragments scattered across the brain. Sensations, emotions, bits of language, flashes of imagery. When you recall an event, those fragments come together into a new version, influenced by what you feel and believe now. Then, when you store it again, that new version becomes the latest copy. The simple act of looking changes what you're looking at. Imagine a witness in a courtroom. They're asked to recall a car accident they saw months ago. At first, they picture the scene vaguely: a red car, a screech, a flash of movement. Under questioning, they focus on the driver's face. Was it frightened? Angry? Each repetition sharpens one part of the image while fading another. After hours of examination, the witness is confident in what they remember, but the memory is no longer the same one they started with. The attention itself has rewritten it. Scientists have observed this effect in studies of eyewitness testimony. When people are asked to describe what they saw, the wording of the question changes their recall. If asked, "How fast were the cars going when they hit each other?" participants estimate a lower speed than if asked, "When they smashed each other." The single word shifts perception, and that perception becomes part of memory. The observer, whether a scientist, a questioner, or the mind itself, participates in the creation of what is remembered. The same paradox happens in personal reflection. When you analyze your past, you can't avoid shaping it with your current perspective. Looking back on an argument, you might see yourself as more patient now than you were then. The new version fits the person you've become. Each time you revisit the event, you make small edits, toning down anger, emphasizing understanding, smoothing contradictions. Over time, the reflection becomes the memory. Observation replaces experience. This happens not only with personal memories, but also with collective ones. When historians study a historical event, their interpretation reshapes how society remembers it. Each new analysis reframes causes, heroes, and victims. Generations later, the public memory reflects the lens of those who studied it. The observer's paradox extends from individual minds to entire cultures. The more we examine the past, the more we rewrite it. You can see this effect in therapy, where examining old experiences is part of healing. A person revisits a painful childhood memory, guided to see it with compassion. The act of observation changes its emotional tone. What once felt terrifying might now feel sad or forgivable. The event hasn't changed, but its meaning has. This is not distortion, but adaptation. By observing the memory differently, the mind transforms its impact. The same process that can distort also allows healing. Photographs show the paradox in another way. Looking at an old picture doesn't just trigger memory, it edits it. You focus on the frozen moment and start to believe that's how it truly was. The surrounding sounds, smells, and movements fade. The photo becomes the event. When you later recall it, you're remembering the act of looking at the photo more than the original experience. Each observation overwrites part of what you were trying to preserve. Even the scientific study of memory reveals this problem. In experiments, researchers measure how people recall lists or images over time. But each test affects the next. The first recall strengthens some items and weakens others. The act of testing becomes part of the memory process. Scientists try to observe memory objectively, but their methods alter the phenomenon they're studying. The closer they look, the more they influence what they see. Everyday life is filled with subtle examples. Someone asks you to describe your first day at a new job. You hesitate, unsure where to start, and choose one vivid detail: the smell of coffee in the office, the nervous handshake with your manager. By speaking it aloud, you fix that moment as the anchor. Next time you recall it, the other details will circle that one. You've created a focal point through observation. The memory's structure has shifted. The paradox also explains why people can grow apart in how they remember shared experiences. Two friends might discuss a trip they took years ago. One emphasizes the laughter, the other the arguments. Each has revisited the memory in different moods and for different reasons. The versions have diverged through observation. They're not disagreeing about the facts. They're comparing separate reconstructions built by attention over time. Technology adds new layers to this effect. Social media encourages constant reflection. On this day, reminders, photo archives, and public sharing of the past. Each time you revisit these moments, you reinterpret them for an audience, and that interpretation becomes the dominant version. You no longer remember simply being there. You remember how you described being there. The observer isn't just you now. It's everyone watching. The collective gaze reinforces the rewritten version until it becomes the only one you can access. The observer's paradox in memory is quiet but relentless. It happens in every recall, every story, every reflection. Observation stabilizes certain details while erasing others. The more you analyze, the more your focus becomes part of the memory itself. Just as light changes the behavior of a particle when measured, awareness reshapes what the mind retrieves. We cannot study memory without disturbing it, because the act of remembering is not passive, it's creative. Every glance backward is a brushstroke on the image we're trying to preserve. You hear a story so often that it begins to feel like something you lived through. It might be a tale from your parents, a scene from an old movie, or a piece of national history retold until it feels personal. The border between story and memory dissolves. You can almost see it, almost remember the light and the air around it. This is collective dream logic, the strange way a society's myths pass into memory until people believe they recall what they've only absorbed through culture. Human memory is porous. It doesn't exist in isolation. It forms inside language, tradition, and community. What a person remembers often reflects what their group needs to believe. Cultures create stories to explain themselves, and those stories, repeated and shared, begin to feel like recollection. The logic of myth and the logic of dreaming are similar. Both use emotion, not evidence, to define truth. When a myth captures the feeling of something real, it can slip into memory unnoticed. You can see this in families. A parent might tell a child about the Great Blizzard of '85, describing how everyone huddled around candles, laughing in the cold. The child, born years later, grows up hearing it again and again. They see old photos. They imagine the glow of the candlelight, the sound of the storm. By adulthood, they're certain they were there. The story became so detailed and repeated that it embedded itself in their personal archive. The collective dream of the family turned into an individual memory. The same happens at the level of nations. A people might remember a golden age, a time of courage, unity, or moral clarity. The evidence may be thin, but the emotional truth feels strong. Art, literature, and politics reinforce the idea until it becomes part of shared identity. Those who grow up hearing about it inherit not just the story, but the feeling of having lived through it. The myth becomes collective memory. Societies dream together, and those dreams guide how they remember. Mythic memory often emerges around events that are painful or confusing. When facts can't offer comfort, meaning fills the gap. People create simple stories that explain complex events. A single hero who saved many lives, a villain whose defeat restored balance. These stories spread because they bring order to chaos. Over time, they replace the messy truth. The real event fades, but the emotional imprint remains. The story fits what people need to feel, and that makes it durable. Think about how children learn history. Textbooks present smooth narratives: discovery, struggle, triumph. The lessons are easier to teach and to remember than the uncertainty of real life. A student might later recall these simplified accounts as vivid scenes: pioneers crossing plains, revolutionaries writing in candlelight. The images are cultural creations, but they feel like personal memories. When enough people share them, they gain the weight of experience. Films and media strengthen this process. A dramatized version of a historical event can overwrite the real one. When millions of people see the same portrayal, it creates a shared visual language. Ask someone about ancient Rome, and they might picture the same marble halls and fiery battles, not because they studied them, but because they've seen them on screen. The imagery becomes the collective dream, shaping memory even for those who know it's fiction. Collective dream logic also appears in smaller, modern forms. Online communities generate myths about internet culture. The first meme, the lost video, the event everyone swears happened. These fragments spread, gather embellishment, and settle into shared nostalgia. People describe them as if they witnessed them firsthand. In digital spaces, myth-making moves faster, but the result is the same: shared belief disguised as memory. At the heart of this process is emotion. Myths succeed when they evoke feeling: pride, grief, awe, belonging. The brain encodes emotion more strongly than fact. When a story stirs deep emotion, it activates the same pathways used for actual experience. The mind stores it as lived reality. You might remember how a film made you cry more vividly than an event from your own life. Emotional truth becomes stronger than factual truth, and in the collective mind, that emotional truth becomes memory. The pattern repeats across cultures. Myths of creation, flood, rebirth, or loss appear in different forms everywhere. They describe experiences that feel universal: fear of destruction, hope for renewal. People recognize themselves in these stories and carry them as inherited memories. When someone says, It feels like we've been here before. They might be responding to this deep narrative familiarity, the sense that the collective dream has crossed into personal recollection. Collective dream logic also shapes how societies respond to crisis. After disasters, communities quickly build stories that preserve meaning. They highlight unity and resilience, editing out chaos and fear. Years later, people recall that time not as it was, but as the myth that replaced it. The myth protects identity. It gives suffering a purpose. Even those who lived through the event remember it through the lens of the shared story, not through the confusion they actually felt. Over time, myths merge and evolve like dreams. Elements from different eras blend. An old hero adopts the face of a modern one. A past tragedy is remembered through present language. Memory follows emotion rather than chronology. The result is a living mosaic of impressions, a shared dream that feels like history. People inherit these dream memories without noticing the seams. They quote them, reenact them, teach them, and call them truth. There's comfort in this. Shared myths create cohesion. They allow people to feel connected across time. When someone says, "We've always believed this," what they mean is that the belief has survived as memory, even if it was born as story. The collective dream replaces uncertainty with belonging. The cost is that truth, the messy, contradictory kind, becomes harder to reach. Collective dream logic shows how easily memory and myth trade places. A society tells itself stories to understand who it is, and those stories slowly harden into remembered reality. The dream gains the weight of experience, and experience fades into symbol. What began as imagination becomes evidence, and the line between history and memory dissolves into the shared sleep of a culture that dreams itself awake. You remember a long, complicated event, a year of struggle, a drawn-out argument, a slow change that unfolded over time. But when you describe it, it comes out as a sentence or two. That was when everything fell apart. That was the year I figured it out. The details vanish. The contradictions are gone. The story has been flattened into something clean and certain. This is reality compression, the process by which complex events collapse into simplified falsehoods that feel easier to hold. The mind does this because it seeks efficiency. Life produces more information than memory can store, so the brain summarizes. It removes redundancy and reduces confusion. When we compress, we trade texture for clarity. But the more we simplify, the further we drift from accuracy. We remember the pattern, not the process. The brain prefers a smooth story to a tangled truth. And over time, those smooth stories replace the rougher, truer ones underneath. Think about how people talk about major life changes. A divorce becomes a bad marriage. A job loss becomes the best thing that ever happened to me. These summaries contain emotional truth, but they erase the real progression, the doubts, compromises, and shifting motivations that defined the experience. What remains is a compressed version that fits the present narrative. The event becomes smaller and more symbolic each time it's told. The nuance dissolves under repetition. You can see reality compression in history as well. Entire decades are remembered through slogans or turning points. The Roaring Twenties, the Great Depression, the Summer of Love. These labels compress thousands of conflicting experiences into a single mood. They make history digestible, but also misleading. Most people living through those times wouldn't have recognized them by the shorthand we use now. The simplification comes later, when the need for coherence outweighs the complexity of what really happened. The The same process occurs in personal identity. When you look back on your life, you don't remember every moment equally. You pick the key scenes that seem to explain who you are. The brain builds a narrative from these fragments, each one condensed and emotionally charged. The moments that don't fit fade out. If someone asks how you became who you are, you reach for the story that makes sense, not the one that's exact. The simplification becomes a kind of emotional shorthand, close enough to truth to feel right, but too neat to be real. Psychologists describe this as narrative reconstruction. Each time you recall an event, you reframe it in the light of what you now know. The retelling compresses cause and effect, linking moments that may never have been connected. Over years, these condensed stories become the stable structures of memory. They let you navigate life with a sense of continuity, but they distort the original events beyond recognition. You can see reality compression at work in politics and media. A complex issue like economic inequality gets reduced to a single phrase or image. The public needs to process it quickly, so language simplifies it into something emotionally charged: the working man, the elite, the forgotten. Each phrase flattens layers of truth into symbols that carry more feeling than fact. Once repeated enough, these symbols replace the events themselves in collective memory. People stop remembering what actually happened and start remembering the version that fit best on a headline. Social media accelerates this compression. Online, the most complex events in the world are reduced to clips, captions, and hashtags. A war becomes a 30-second video. A protest becomes a single image. The format demands brevity, and brevity rewards emotional clarity. People share and comment on the compressed version, not the real one. Over time, that simplified narrative becomes the only one available. When later generations look back, they inherit not the event, but its reduction. The same thing happens inside the mind. Emotions compress over time. A long period of uncertainty becomes remembered as fear. A slow realization turns into a single flash of insight. The body recalls how it felt, but the brain edits out the gradual unfolding. When someone says, "I just knew," what they often mean is that years of small signals have been folded into one decisive moment. Memory shrinks time to fit emotional logic. Consider a personal example. You once had a falling out with a friend. At the time, it was messy. Small arguments, silences, attempts to repair things. Years later, you might say, "We just grew apart." The phrase is tidy, but it hides everything that mattered: the subtle tension, the confusion, the mutual retreat. You're not lying, you're summarizing. The compression turns a painful, uneven process into a clean explanation. The story fits inside a single breath, even though it once filled months. Reality compression also shapes collective trauma. After crises, wars, pandemics, disasters, societies condense the experience into digestible forms. They build memorials, slogans, and anniversaries that give meaning to chaos. The simplification provides comfort and direction, but it also seals away the contradictory truths of how people actually lived through it. The public version becomes a symbol, and the individual memories fade into the shadow of that symbol. Language reinforces the compression. Words like change, loss, or healing stand in for thousands of moments. When people speak about them, they rely on these abstract terms to carry emotional weight. The more often the words are used, the more detached they become from the real experiences they describe. The result is communication that feels accurate but lacks depth. A conversation about symbols, not sensations. Technology intensifies this even further. The constant flood of information forces the mind to filter quickly. We scroll, summarize, and move on. Complex events become quick impressions, and those impressions form the basis of what we think we know. The compression is automatic. The brain edits for survival. It can't hold every detail, so it keeps only the most striking ones, the loudest emotion, the clearest image. What's left behind becomes the illusion of understanding. Reality compression explains why memories, news, and history all feel simpler than they are. The reduction isn't malicious, it's structural. Human cognition depends on patterns, and patterns require simplification. But the compressed version of truth, repeated often enough, becomes a falsehood, one that feels cleaner, safer, and easier to share. We tell it not to deceive, but to function. Over time, the simplified story becomes the only one we remember, leaving the full complexity of what really happened buried beneath the weight of what we needed it to mean. You remember your life as a line, one event leading to another, a story that makes sense. You tell it to yourself when you need to explain how you became who you are. It feels smooth, continuous, logical. But the truth is that memory doesn't work like that. The brain doesn't store life in a single thread. It keeps fragments scattered across networks of sensory and emotional data, and each time you recall them, it assembles those pieces into a shape that feels whole. This is synthetic continuity, the mind's instinct to invent coherence where none actually exists. The illusion is comforting. People need to believe their lives make sense. A story with missing parts would feel unstable. So the brain fills gaps automatically, connecting unrelated events with imaginary bridges. You remember causes where there were only coincidences. You remember motives where there were only reactions. Each reconstruction becomes smoother, more believable. The result feels like truth, even when it's mostly inference. Imagine you wake from a vivid dream. The images are fragmented. A hallway, a friend's voice, a feeling of running. As you describe it, you begin to link the scenes. You decide you were running to meet your friend in the hallway. The story sounds right, but you just created it. The brain dislikes disorder, so it imposes logic after the fact. That same process happens in waking memory, though more subtly. When you recall the past, your mind knits together the disjointed pieces until the transitions seem natural. The seams disappear under the weight of narrative. Psychologists have studied this phenomenon through confabulation, a term used for when people unintentionally fabricate details to fill memory gaps. In some neurological conditions, like amnesia, the brain invents entire sequences of events that never happened. But even healthy minds do a smaller version every day. You forget the order of conversations or the reason behind a choice, and your mind supplies plausible links without realizing it. The invented continuity feels right because it maintains identity and stability. This process isn't limited to memory. It shapes perception too. When your eyes move rapidly, as they do every few seconds, the brain briefly stops processing visual input to avoid blur. Yet you never see the gaps. The brain fills them in, creating the illusion of an unbroken visual world. Synthetic continuity keeps experience seamless by erasing the discontinuities you'd otherwise notice. Without it, reality would feel fragmented, like watching a film with missing frames. In daily life, this illusion of coherence helps people function. When something unexpected happens, the mind quickly inserts it into an understandable frame. You might say, "I knew this would happen," even when you didn't. The story restores order to uncertainty. It protects you from feeling that life is random. Memory follows the same rule. If the pattern is missing, the brain will supply one. Consider how people recall major turning points. Someone might describe their career path as deliberate and strategic, a chain of informed decisions leading to success. But if you look closely, chance and coincidence played major roles. An encounter at a party, a missed opportunity that redirected effort, a piece of advice remembered years later. The story sounds linear because that's how the person remembers it. The brain edits chaos into purpose. It invents a cause for every effect because meaning feels safer than randomness. Synthetic continuity explains why conflicting memories can coexist without discomfort. Two people can remember the same event differently, yet each version feels internally consistent. Each brain has filled its own gaps in its own way. The disagreements aren't always about facts. They're about the invisible bridges each person built to connect them. When both stories seem complete, both feel true. The same pattern appears in how societies remember themselves. Nations, communities, and cultures tell collective stories that smooth over contradictions. History becomes a sequence of inevitabilities rather than a tangle of choices and accidents. This narrative editing keeps the group identity intact. Each omission or rearrangement serves the same function as an individual filling in a memory gap. It preserves coherence. The result isn't accuracy, it's continuity. You can see synthetic continuity clearly in grief. When someone dies, those left behind often rewrite memories to make sense of the loss. They see foreshadowing in past behavior or imagine final moments as peaceful, even when they weren't. The brain weaves meaning into events that might have had none. The revised story helps the living reconcile what cannot be explained. The continuity is an act of compassion, a way of protecting emotional stability through narrative repair. Film editors use a similar principle when cutting between shots. The mind expects visual and emotional flow. So when two scenes are arranged with minimal overlap, the viewer automatically fills in the missing action. A character reaches for a door in one shot and steps through it in another, and your brain supplies the unseen movement between. Memory works like this too. When details are missing, imagination fills the frame, and the final cut feels complete. Technology has made this more visible. When people curate their lives online, they present sequences of moments that imply a continuous story: progress, adventure, growth. Viewers see the pattern and assume the gaps between posts are filled with matching experiences. Over time, even the person posting begins to believe in the narrative they've built. The synthetic continuity becomes self-sustaining. It replaces lived experience with a smoother, more coherent version that both author and audience accept as truth. This drive for continuity shapes not only how we remember, but how we think about the future. The mind projects upcoming events as logical extensions of the past. When reality doesn't follow the expected path, confusion or anxiety appears. People feel as if something has broken, when in fact it's only the illusion of seamlessness collapsing. The brain expects a single timeline and struggles when the world behaves otherwise. In everyday storytelling, synthetic continuity shows up in the way people explain small mistakes. You might recall missing your train because you left late, when really you left on time but paused to tie your shoe, and that delay made you miss a green light, which delayed your arrival at the platform. The brain compresses the chain into one clean cause. The explanation sounds reasonable, even though it's a reconstruction. The edit removes randomness and restores control. The mind's constant rewriting keeps identity stable. Each retelling of your past becomes another layer of editing. The gaps shrink, the logic tightens, and contradictions fade. Over time, the rough edges of experience are replaced by the illusion of a continuous self moving smoothly through time. What you remember is not a record of what happened, but a film cut together so expertly that you forget it was ever spliced at all.